Mariana Baza, a 19-year-old physiotherapy student, studied at a private university near her hometown of Bariri. Born in 2000, she was the only child of Ayrton and Marlene Forty, a couple devoted to their daughter. Her family described her as a bright, kind, and compassionate person, always full of smiles and warm words. Her love for physiotherapy went beyond just choosing a career. It reflected her caring personality and desire to help others heal and find relief from pain. Her parents were immensely proud of her dedication. At university, she was a hardworking student who managed to balance her studies with an active social life. She made friends easily, whether at school or at the gym where she worked out regularly. Mariana had been in a 3-year relationship with her boyfriend, Jefferson Viana. At 22, Jefferson was serving in the Brazilian Navy in Sao Paulo. The two had met in their late teens and built a strong relationship founded on mutual respect and shared aspirations. They were a loving couple, often sending each other playful messages and celebrating life's milestones together. On the morning of September 24, 2019, Mariana and Jefferson were exchanging their usual texts. While they faced challenges like any young couple, especially the distance caused by his Navy duties, they maintained their bond through calls and messages. There were no signs of any issues between them. They were happy and planning their future together. That morning, everything in Bariri seemed normal. Around 7 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise, and Mariana was already starting her day. She was at the gym with her friend, Heloisa Passarello, fitting in an early workout to clear her mind and stay active. The gym was a familiar place for Mariana, where she often balanced exercise with catching up with friends. By 8 a.m., the workout was over. At 8:11 a.m., Mariana walked out of the gym, with Heloisa following a few steps behind. The street outside was quiet, lined with homes and a few parked cars. Mariana, carrying her phone, appeared to be checking notifications or organizing her thoughts about the day ahead, classes, assignments, and maybe a quick text to Jefferson. She was focused, with a busy schedule ahead. As she approaches the car, the camera catches her slowing down, her head tilted slightly as if noticing something unusual. At 8:12 a.m., she stopped at the front passenger side of her Volkswagen. Her tire was completely flat, so deflated it would be impossible to drive. Heloisa lingered near the gym entrance, watching Mariana by her car. Mariana looked more annoyed than worried. Surveillance footage showed her pulling out her phone, possibly deciding who to call for help, maybe her dad, her reliable go-to for car issues, or her cousin, who lived nearby. However, she didn't make a call, at least not right away. The street wasn't empty. The footage captured a man crossing from the opposite sidewalk toward Mariana's car. He was dressed casually in jeans and a plain shirt. However, the cameras couldn't clearly capture his face due to the distance and grainy quality of the feed. He approached Mariana directly, calm and purposeful, exuding a friendly demeanor as he offered to help with her flat tire. Mariana hesitated. She was not naive and was thinking whether to drive to her father's house or call someone she felt she could trust. However, the man was persistent. He warns her that driving on a flat tire could damage the wheel, making her believe that he truly cares about her. Around 8:15 a.m., Heloisa, Mariana's friend, had to leave for work. She got on her motorcycle and rode off. Meanwhile, the man continued speaking with Mariana, his gestures becoming more animated as he attempted to convince her. By 8:28 a.m., the situation shifted. Footage from the gym's cameras showed the man pointing across the street toward a small chakra, a rural property with a house and some land. He claimed he could properly fix the tire there and persuaded Mariana to follow him. Although hesitant and cautious, Mariana eventually agreed. At 8:29 a.m., she drove her Volkswagen across the street into the chakra's yard. Once she entered, the gate closed behind her, and her car disappeared from the camera's view. That was the last time Mariana was seen alive in public. The chakra's yard, hidden by walls and the closed gate, was a blind spot, outside the coverage of the gyms and nearby cameras. The street soon returned to its normal routine, unaware of the danger unfolding just out of sight. Before disappearing, Mariana had taken a picture of the man kneeling by her car and sent it to her boyfriend, Jefferson. Their conversation was lighthearted, typical of their 3-year relationship. Mariana didn't seem fearful when she sent the photo. Instead, she laughed about the situation. Jefferson didn't sense any danger either. By noon, Jefferson tried messaging Mariana again but got no response. Her phone, usually active with notifications, was completely silent. He called her, but the call went directly to voicemail. Later, he recalled noticing that her phone appeared to have no signal, a detail that would continue to haunt him. His concern grew as the hours passed. Mariana was supposed to attend her physiotherapy classes in Bauru, a 30-mile drive from her hometown of Bariri. She had never missed a class without notifying someone beforehand. By 2 p.m., Jefferson began contacting her friends to see if anyone had heard from her, but no one had. Growing increasingly worried, he reached out to her family, including her parents, Berton and Marlene, as well as her aunts and cousins, all of whom were very close to her and maintained regular contact. The family grew equally alarmed. Her father, Ayrton, repeatedly tried calling her, but her phone remained off. By 3 p.m., the family was convinced that something was seriously wrong. They contacted the Bariri police to report Mariana missing and emphasized the urgency of the situation. The police promptly filed a missing persons report and began gathering information from her close contacts. Jefferson was interviewed first. He shared the photo and text messages Mariana had sent him that morning. The photo, time-stamped around 8:30 a.m., showed a man crouched next to Mariana's Volkswagen, working on a tire. His face was partially visible, but the angle of the photo made it difficult to identify him. Jefferson told the police that everything had seemed normal. Mariana hadn't appeared uncomfortable, and the man looked like a helpful passerby. The police considered the photo an important lead, but more information was needed. They asked Jefferson if Mariana had any enemies or recent conflicts. He insisted that she was well-liked and had no issues in her personal life, adding that their relationship was happy and stable. His alibi was verified, as he was in Sao Paulo fulfilling his naval duties at the time. His colleagues confirmed his whereabouts. Investigators then spoke to one of Mariana's gym friends, Heloisa, who had been with her earlier that morning. Heloisa confirmed the timeline of the incident. Mariana had finished her workout around 8 a.m., and they chatted briefly before stepping outside together. It was then that Mariana noticed the flat tire on her car. A man approached and offered to help her. Heloisa did not recognize the man, but she described him as friendly and non-threatening in appearance. She recalled that Mariana was hesitant at first but eventually let him assist after he pointed out that driving on the flat tire could damage the wheel. She left around 8:15 a.m., assuming everything was fine. Later, when speaking to the police, she expressed deep guilt, wishing she had stayed with Mariana longer. Heloisa's description of the man was vague: average height, casual clothes. However, it matched the person in the photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson. When police asked Heloisa for more information, asking if she had noticed anyone else in the area or anything suspicious, she mentioned only a few people exercising and passers-by, but did not see anything unusual. The busy morning traffic made spotting anything unusual difficult. The police reviewed the gym's CCTV footage, which showed Mariana driving into a nearby property, referred to as the Chakra, at 8:29 a.m. They visited the location, which was owned by a local resident who had hired a handyman, Rodrigo Pereira Alves, to paint it. The owner confirmed that Rodrigo had been there that morning but said he had since disappeared. The officers inspected the area but found no signs of Mariana or her car. However, another surveillance tape revealed her Volkswagen being driven away an hour later. The footage showed the driver stepping out briefly, and their clothing made it clear the driver was not Mariana. The photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson became critical evidence. Police have secretly launched an investigation into the man in the photo without releasing his identity to avoid exposure. They discovered he had a criminal history, including serious offenses, which raised suspicions. The flat tire, possibly deliberately slashed, suggested a premeditated plan rather than a random event. The police initiated covert surveillance near the suspect's last known location while tracking Mariana's phone. Its last signal came from the gym's area and went offline around 8:36 a.m., likely turned off or destroyed. Knowing her car had been driven away, officers issued an alert to neighboring towns with details about the Volkswagen and the man in the photo, now their primary suspect. The car was last seen heading west toward Itapolis. In response, authorities expanded the search operation, deploying reinforcements, including a helicopter and additional officers. By 5 p.m., word had already spread quickly throughout Bariri. Everyone was talking animatedly, texting, and trying to piece together the details of the event. They were tracking a car and following clues from a photo. Soon, a name surfaced: Rodrigo Pereira Alves. He was a career criminal with a long history of offenses, including robbery, kidnapping, extortion, and attempted robbery. He had served 12 years in prison and had been released just 30 days before Mariana's kidnapping. The photo Mariana had sent matched him, as did footage from nearby CCTV cameras. As the evening progressed, the search intensified. By 8 p.m., the effort was relentless, with helicopters in the air and patrol teams on the ground. At around 9 p.m., the search team located the Volkswagen abandoned in Itapolis, near a sugarcane plantation. The car was immediately secured, and forensic investigators began their work. The vehicle was found with its doors unlocked, keys missing, and interior in disarray. Evidence showed a violent struggle had taken place, with scratches on the dashboard, torn seat belts, and severe damage to the interior of the car. Under the seat, police found a knife, though it wasn't believed to have been used in the crime. There was no blood, but the evidence made it clear something serious had taken place. After discovering the car, authorities intensified their pursuit of Rodrigo. He had grown up in a troubled home, dropped out of school early, and turned to crime as a teenager. Known as a loner, he worked sporadic jobs in construction and mechanics but had no stable employment. Few people in the community were even aware he was out of prison, as his return had gone unnoticed. Using cell phone tracking, the police discovered that he was hiding at a relative's house. Officers surrounded the area, but Rodrigo, realizing he was trapped, attempted to escape by climbing onto a nearby rooftop. After a tense standoff, he was captured. Disheveled and gaunt, he initially resisted and denied involvement, but the evidence against him, including Mariana's photo, surveillance footage, and tire tracks, was overwhelming. Eventually, he provided information on where Mariana could be found. The search for Mariana led investigators back to the sugarcane plantation where the car had been abandoned. Late the next morning, they made a devastating discovery. Mariana's body was found hidden about a mile from the car, concealed among the dense sugarcane stalks. She was gagged, blindfolded, and her hands were tied behind her back. The scene was heartbreaking. An autopsy performed revealed that her cause of death was strangulation. Her injuries were severe: bruises on her arms and legs, scratches on her face, and broken fingernails, all indicating she had fought desperately against her attacker. The autopsy also investigated the possibility of abuse, though the results remain inconclusive, as further testing was required. No stab wounds or gunshot injuries were found, ruling out the knife discovered in the car as a weapon. The coroner estimated that she had died within hours of her disappearance, likely between 8 a.m. and noon on September 24th. The presence of the bindings and gag indicated that she had been restrained before her death, suggesting a deliberate and brutal act. Rodrigo was charged with kidnapping, abuse, robbery, and murder as prosecutors built their case using physical evidence and his prior criminal record. The prosecution argued that he had used the pretense of offering help to gain Mariana's trust, overpowering her in the yard of the property. Investigators noted a clear pattern of impulsive and predatory behavior, consistent with his criminal past. But why was Rodrigo even in Bariri? It turned out he had obtained the job through a friend, claiming that it was part of a fresh start. Rodrigo admitted to luring Mariana to the chakra, stating that the incident happened on a whim. He claimed to have hitched a ride with her car after fixing her tire, then took her into his house and panicked when she tried to leave. However, investigators dismissed his claims of panic, labeling the act as cold and calculated. In early 2021, more than a year after Mariana was murdered on September 24, 2019, the trial of Rodrigo began at the Judicial Center near Bariri. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, locals, and media outlets, all focused on Rodrigo, a 39-year-old defendant who sat expressionless in the dock. The prosecution, led by experienced attorneys, aimed to prove that Rodrigo was a calculated predator. They presented critical evidence, including CCTV footage from the gym and a photo Mariana had sent to her boyfriend. The prosecution highlighted key points in their case. One piece of evidence was the flat tire on Mariana's car, believed to have been deliberately slashed, which, they argued, demonstrated premeditation. They painted Rodrigo as someone who targeted Mariana, manipulated her trust, and meticulously planned her abduction and murder. His criminal history became a focal point: 12 years in prison for kidnapping and attempted murder, having only recently been released before the crime occurred. The autopsy report was damning, describing strangulation, bruises, and defensive wounds that all suggested a violent struggle. The prosecution argued that Mariana was likely strangled with her own shirt during the attack. The defense faced a challenging case and employed strategies to cast doubt and downplay the prosecution's arguments. They highlighted gaps in the forensic evidence, emphasizing the absence of blood or DNA to conclusively prove abuse. They also claimed the knife found in the car could belong to anyone. Despite their efforts, it was clear the odds were against them. Mariana's family, including her parents, Ayrton and Marlene, as well as other relatives, attended all of the court proceedings, their grief evident on their faces. The prosecution called them as witnesses to testify about Mariana's character, portraying her vibrancy and the profound loss her death had caused. Marlene, her mother, described her daughter as their everything, highlighting that she was always smiling and always helping others. Jefferson, Mariana's boyfriend, also testified, tearfully recalling their last messages and the haunting photo she had sent him. He confessed emotionally to the court that he would never forgive himself for not realizing that she was in danger. The prosecution used the testimony to emphasize the manipulation and betrayal of trust that Rodrigo had committed against Mariana, a point that the jury had to consider. Another surveillance video captured Rodrigo leaning against Mariana's car before she left the gym, further supporting the claim that he had intentionally sabotaged her vehicle to trap her. Rodrigo's defense team did not contest his presence at the crime scene. That was undeniable. Instead, they focused on portraying him as mentally unstable, arguing that his 12 years in prison had left him impulsive and erratic, rather than a calculated killer. They did not deny the crime itself, but tried to reduce its severity, aiming for a conviction of manslaughter rather than femicide to lessen his sentence. In March 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Rodrigo Pereira Alves was sentenced to 40 years, 10 months, and 18 days in prison. But the story didn't end there. Mariana's mother, Marlene, who had become a vocal advocate for preserving her daughter's memory, passed away in February 2022 at the age of 51. On September 23, 2024, just one day before the 5th anniversary of Mariana's murder, Rodrigo died from an unspecified illness in the intensive care unit of Botacata Hospital. While it was reported that he suffered from a chronic disease, details of his exact cause of death were not disclosed by the prison or the hospital. Daylene Carlson, a 23-year-old, moved from Idaho to Stockton, California in 2011 to attend college. She was staying with her Aunt Maggie and was excited to begin this new chapter of her life. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Daylene was preparing to go out for the evening. With 3 months left before college started, her cousin Cicely had planned to introduce her to the local nightlife. They were supposed to meet friends at Finnegan's Bar, but Cicely wasn't feeling well due to a fever and decided to stay home. Daylene went to the bar alone and was expected to return by 1 a.m. However, when 1 a.m. came and Daylene hadn't returned, her Aunt Maggie became concerned. She tried calling Daylene multiple times but received no response. She stayed up all night, repeatedly calling Daylene's phone, but there was still no answer. At first, she thought Daylene might have stayed overnight at a friend's house. By morning, not seeing any sign of her niece, she decided to contact the police and report her missing. The police took Maggie's report but initially hoped that Daylene had simply stayed with friends and would return soon. Meanwhile, Daylene's family took action, spreading the word of her disappearance on social media and urging anyone with information to come forward. Her unexplained absence was highly unusual, leading the family to fear that something terrible might have occurred. On August 8, 2011, the day after Daylene's disappearance, the police officially launched an investigation. Detectives began by visiting Maggie's house. They searched Daylene's room, interviewed family members, and worked to rule out the possibility of family involvement in her disappearance. Daylene was a typical American girl, young, attractive, and full of dreams for the future. Her sudden disappearance was alarming and out of character. Detectives searched her room but found no signs suggesting she had run away. All her belongings, including important documents, were still there. A photo taken by Cicely on the night of her disappearance showed her wearing a brown and white striped top and ripped jeans. According to Cicely, she had planned to visit Finnegan's bar that evening, a place they often went to together. The next step for the detectives was to visit Finnegan's bar and interview the staff to gather more information. The bar manager recalled seeing Daylene outside on the street around midnight on the night she vanished. He reviewed the incident of the evening but didn't notice anything unusual. The bar had 2 functional security cameras that recorded hours of footage from Saturday night, footage the detectives hoped would provide crucial leads. Since reviewing all the footage would take time, the detectives obtained a copy to analyze at the police station. They aimed to identify whom Daylene interacted with and, most importantly, whom she left the bar with. Initially, the footage didn't reveal anything unusual. It captured typical scenes of young people gathered outside the bar, talking, smoking, and enjoying their night. However, one young woman stood out because of her brown and white striped top, which matched what Daylene had been wearing. Upon closer inspection, the detectives confirmed that the woman was indeed Daylene. They carefully tracked her movements on camera to piece together what happened. At 12:41 a.m., she was seen re-entering the bar. Another surveillance camera, located in the hallway near the restrooms, captured additional footage of her movements, which the detectives reviewed next. At 12:47 a.m., 6 minutes after re-entering the bar, Daylene appeared on the hallway surveillance footage. She was drinking and seemed at ease, though perhaps slightly vulnerable. She was the only woman in a hallway surrounded by several young men, making everyone in the footage either a potential suspect or a witness. The surveillance video showed Daylene looking happy and relaxed until a young man entered the frame at 12:48 a.m. The man approached her from behind and placed his arm around her waist. Shortly after that, she walked into the restroom. The man, who had a goatee and wore a backward cap, lingered further down the hallway. Daylene didn't appear noticeably upset by his presence, nor did she appear particularly pleased to see him. After reviewing the footage, detectives recognized the need to identify the man in question. They spoke again with Daylene's family and friends to gather more details. Through these conversations, they discovered that the man seen putting his arm around Daylene was Jason Gilley. Daylene, Cicely, and their group of friends were familiar with Jason and frequently attended social events at his house. Detectives soon located Jason's home to question him about the night Daylene vanished. Jason told detectives that he had spent the evening at the bar with Daylene and initially planned to take her home. However, he claimed he left early due to an emergency. His young son was sick. He stated he left the bar around 1 a.m. and arrived home by 1:30 a.m. He also revealed the name of another person who might be significant, Jacob Evangelisti. According to Jason, Daylene was dating Jacob, but they had a heated argument in his presence just 4 days before she disappeared. This detail caught the detectives' attention, as jealousy often plays a role in impulsive or harmful actions. They decided to investigate Jacob Evangelisti further to determine if he could provide additional information. Investigators found recent photos of Jacob on Daylene's social media pages, prompting them to review the bar's security footage again to see if Jacob was present. They focused on footage from 10:06 p.m., when Daylene exited the restroom. She stepped outside and approached a man leaning against the wall. Her demeanor suddenly shifted. She began gesturing aggressively and appeared visibly angry. Detectives tried to determine if the man was Jacob, but glare from the bright lights made his face unclear. After a brief exchange, Daleen walked away. The detectives continued examining the footage until the man turned toward the camera, confirming his identity as Jacob. Jacob was brought in for questioning. During the interview, he appeared noticeably anxious. When asked about his relationship with Daleen and the last time he saw her, Jacob explained that their final encounter was at Finnegan's bar. According to Jacob, Daleen broke up with him that night, which upset him deeply because he didn't want the relationship to end. He claimed that Daleen eventually left the bar without him and insisted he had no involvement in her disappearance. The detectives reviewed CCTV footage to verify Jacob's story. At 1:09 a.m., Jacob entered the bar. A few minutes later, Daleen appeared on camera. She seemed to be saying goodbye to one of the customers, and by 1:15 a.m., she was no longer visible. The detectives continued watching the footage until the bar closed and all the customers had left. By 2:38 a.m., the lights were off, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Neither Daleen nor Jacob appeared on the footage again. At this stage, suspicion fell on Jacob's potential involvement in Daleen's disappearance, as he may still have been upset over their breakup. However, there was no concrete evidence of foul play. Meanwhile, Daleen's family launched their own search efforts. They created and distributed flyers throughout the city, hoping that someone might have seen Daleen after she left the bar or had information about what had happened to her. At the Stockton Police Department, detectives questioned Jacob again about Daleen's disappearance. He continued to deny knowing anything, but this time, he mentioned a new name, James Cozens. Jacob claimed that James was Daleen's new boyfriend. Although James wasn't officially her boyfriend, the two were romantically involved. Things are further complicated when James is Jason Gilley's best friend and roommate. The timing of Daleen's relationship with James and her sudden disappearance raised suspicions about James and whether he could have been involved in what happened to her. Detectives brought James to the station to discuss his relationship with Daleen. He admitted that they had been seeing each other but insisted he knew nothing about the night she visited the bar, claiming that he was out of the city at the time. While the police were verifying his alibi, he revealed something important. On the night Daleen disappeared, she sent him a text saying she was with a new guy. He showed detectives the messages on his phone, which included one from Daleen mentioning that she was leaving the bar to attend a friend's party. Although the identity of the friend remained unknown, detectives developed a new theory. Daleen might have been looking to continue the night's festivities, possibly stopping at a liquor store or a grocery store on the way. Investigators created a list of nearby 24-hour liquor stores, with the closest one to Finnegan's being Food for Less. Detectives visited the store and discovered it had security cameras both inside and outside. If Daleen had been there, the cameras would have captured her on video. The detectives began reviewing footage from the store's outdoor security camera, and their instincts proved correct. The video showed Daleen entering the store with a young man, but his face wasn't visible, as the footage only captured his back. Unable to identify him, the detectives reviewed footage from other cameras. Soon, they spotted Daleen and the man purchasing what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol. They then turned back to the exterior camera footage to wait for the pair to leave the store. At 1:31 a.m., Daleen and her companion exited the store, and this time, the man's appearance was clearer. His backward baseball cap and goatee matched the description of Jason Gilley, whose face had earlier been identified in footage from Finnegan's bar. This discovery gave the detectives a fresh lead. Jason had previously told investigators that he left the bar alone and was home by 1:30 a.m., taking care of his sick son. However, they now had clear evidence showing him leaving the liquor store with Daleen at 1:31 a.m. The lie about leaving the bar alone instantly made Jason their prime suspect. 1 week after Daleen's disappearance, the police arrested Jason. After his arrest, detectives waited an hour to observe Jason's behavior before beginning the interrogation. Without mentioning the security footage, they revisited Jason's account of the night, asking him again when he returned home from the bar. Jason repeated his lie, claiming he left around 1 a.m. to check on his sick son after receiving a text message from his grandmother. At this point, detectives confronted him, revealing that they had spoken to his grandmother, who denied sending him any messages that night. Jason admitted that his grandmother hadn't contacted him and claimed that he went home alone to be with his son. When asked who he left with, he repeatedly insisted he left alone and went straight home. Detectives caught on to his lies, realizing he was trapping himself in contradictions. They informed him they had surveillance footage disproving his statements. At this point, Jason changed his story, admitting he left the bar with Daylene, went to Food for Less, and bought her a bottle of Jägermeister, but he claimed he drove her back to the bar before heading home. When asked why he initially lied about leaving with Daylene, he said it had slipped his mind. Jason then explained that he had invited Daylene to spend the night on his couch, and she agreed. He admitted they drank the bottle of Jägermeister together and engaged in intimate contact. Afterward, she became upset, said it was a mistake, and decided to walk home. Through tears, Jason shared another version of events, stating that early Sunday morning, while giving Daylene a ride home, they had an argument. He claimed he used his grandmother's car to pick Daylene up near his house. During the 30 to 45-minute drive, Daylene was angry, repeatedly demanded to be let out of the car, and accused Jason of being a horrible person and a piece of garbage. As Jason pulled over, Daylene allegedly got out of the car and ran away. He said that was the last time he saw her. After recounting this story, Jason asked for a lawyer, effectively ending the interview. With insufficient evidence to charge him, the police had no choice but to release him. A few days later, on August 22nd, Jason went to the police station to report his wallet as lost or stolen. Detectives investigating Daylene's disappearance were surprised to see him there. Detective Robert Fain approached Jason and suggested they retrace the route he had taken on the day Daylene disappeared. Jason agreed and led the detective to the spot where he claimed Daylene had jumped out of the car and run away. When the detective asked why Jason hadn't tried to stop her, he explained that a car behind him was honking, so he got back on the freeway. Jason said he had looked for Daylene for 10 to 15 minutes but had to stop because he was running low on gas. He mentioned that he then drove to a gas station on Arch Road in Stockton. Using this information, the detective decided to investigate the gas station. Fortunately, the station had surveillance cameras. The camera footage revealed that Jason arrived at the gas station near the Arch Road exit on Highway 99 in Stockton at 10:46 a.m. on August 7, 2011. He was alone. This was 9 hours and 2 minutes after surveillance footage had captured Jason and Daylene together at a liquor store. At first, Jason's behavior at the gas station appeared normal, but one detail stood out. He looked disheveled, with dirt on his arms and shirt. At one point, the video showed him brushing dirt off his shoulders, which seemed suspicious. He then walked back to his car. Before leaving the station, he checked the passenger door, got into the car, reopened the passenger door about 20 seconds later, and quickly slammed it shut. According to Jason, Daylene was the last person to use that door. Finally, he drove off. After reviewing the footage, detectives developed a new theory. They suspected that Jason had taken Daylene to a field south of Stockton, where he dragged her out of the car in such a rush that the passenger door didn't close completely. They believed Daylene was no longer alive but needed concrete evidence to confirm her death before arresting Jason. Meanwhile, he remained at large, continuing to speak to reporters while Daylene's whereabouts remained unknown. On October 15, 2011, more than 2 months after Daylene's disappearance, there was a major breakthrough in the case. A farmer discovered human remains in a cornfield 20 miles outside of Stockton. Court documents later confirmed that the remains belonged to Daylene and were located approximately 64 feet from Lone Tree Road in Escalon. Sarah Yoshida, a senior criminalist with the Department of Justice, was dispatched to investigate the scene. That afternoon, Sarah found numerous human bones, including a skull, jaw, ribs, vertebrae, foot bones, and leg bones. A torso and a clump of hair were also recovered. Additionally, a black bra was discovered between the remains and a nearby road. Investigators also found 5 shell casings southeast of where the body was located. Later that evening, at around 9 p.m., Dr. Bennett Omalu, a medical examiner for San Joaquin County, arrived at the scene. He requested the soil beneath the body be excavated. 18 inches of soil were removed, placed in a body bag, and then x-rayed, revealing 2 bullets buried in the dirt. Bennett performed an autopsy on Daylene's remains and concluded that she had been shot in the cornfield where her body was found. The bullets had either passed through her body and embedded in the soil beneath or fallen out as her body decomposed. There was a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Her fingers, fingernails, and jewelry were tangled in her hair, which suggested that her hands were near her head when she was shot. The cause of her death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head, with additional gunshot wounds to her torso contributing to her death. Based on the level of decomposition, Bennett concluded that Daylene had likely died on August 7, 2011. Investigators quickly identified Jason Gilley as the prime suspect. He had access to a Jennings semi-automatic handgun owned by a family member. The weapon was seized, and ballistic testing conclusively proved that it was used to kill Daylene. As a result, he was arrested, and investigators started piecing together the events from the night of Daylene's disappearance. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Daylene went to a bar to meet friends, including Jason. At some point during the evening, he persuaded her to go to his house. On their way, they stopped at a liquor store, which was the last location where Daylene was seen alive. Security footage from the store showed no signs of anything unusual. However, after they left the store, events took a tragic turn that ultimately led to Daylene's death. When Daylene's body was discovered, she was naked. Investigators suspected that she may have rejected Jason's advances, prompting him to force himself on her. Although this was considered the most plausible motive, the advanced decomposition of Daylene's body made confirmation impossible. Authorities speculated that when she threatened to report Jason to the police, he forced her into his car, drove far beyond her home, and ultimately killed her in a remote field. In November 2013, Jason Gilley was convicted of Daylene Carlson's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He later attempted to appeal the sentence, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20, 1958 in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child to the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp, and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family relocated to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, eventually working as administrator for State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to back and leg pain. During this time, she started filing disability claims. On August 16, 2016, around noon, Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with mental and physical disabilities since a car crash in 2005, died after being shot 5 times by Pam Hupp in her apartment. Earlier that day, Pam called 911, reporting a robbery. According to Pam, Gumpenberger had jumped out of a vehicle driven by another person, attacked her with a knife while she was in her SUV, and she claimed she slapped the knife away with a karate chop. Pam said she then ran into her house, grabbed her Ruger LCR from the nightstand, and shot Gumpenberger 5 times in self-defense. She alleged that Gumpenberger ordered her to drive him to the bank to withdraw Russ's money, and claimed that Gumpenberger attacked her in her driveway. Russ was Russ Faria, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. At the crime scene, the police found 9 $100 bills on Betsy's body, along with a handwritten note addressed to her. The note contained chilling instructions for the killer, detailing what they needed to do at Pam's apartment. Firstly, they had to retrieve Russ's money. Then they would take Pam into the house, kill her, and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The murderer wanted Pam's life to end in a specific way. They even specified that the knife should be left sticking out of her neck. They were willing to pay Gumpenberger a hefty sum of $10,000 for completing the task. Pam Hupp was arrested for murder. However, truth behind Gumpenberger's death emerged when Pam voluntarily visited O'Fallon police. During her interview, Pam asked if it be recorded, citing her TV appearances with KTVI's Chris Hayes, whom she blamed for attracting criminals. According to the Fallon chief of police and the prosecuting attorney of St. Charles County, Pam had lured Gumpenberger into her home by posing as a television producer named Kathy. She pretended this was for a TV show and tricked him into reenacting a 911 emergency call, providing a perfect cover for the horrific crime she was about to commit. After murdering Gumpenberger, Pam wrote a note that was later found on his body. The police were convinced that Pam was a ruthless killer due to the overwhelming evidence they discovered, including the $100 bills found on the deceased body. It was later revealed that Pam had planted these bills on Gumpenberger's body. Significantly, the 10th $100 bill was found in Pam's dresser, and its serial number was sequential with 3 of the other $100 bills found on the body. The St. Charles County Police subsequently reopened a complaint filed on August 10, 2016, by Carol Alford, who reported a woman matching Pam's description. This woman had approached Alford, offering to pay her $1,000 to participate in a fake 911 call, and was driving an SUV identical to Pam's. It emerged that Carol Alford was not the only one with a similar complaint. Brent Harleton informed the police that Pam had made him the same offer less than an hour before she shot Gumpenberger. Pam claimed in her interview that she had never met Gumpenberger before, but phone records showed that she had been at his doorstep. Further investigation revealed that Pam owned the knife she claimed Gumpenberger used to attack her, which she had purchased along with other items at a store in O'Fallon. It was also discovered that Pam had a habit of storing her knife between her kitchen counter and stove, similar to how the knife was found in her car, wedged between the passenger seat and central console. During a search of her home, police found a carpet swatch that seemed to be placed to protect her rug from Gumpenberger's blood. The police had doubts about Gumpenberger's ability to commit the crime due to his mental state. It became clear that Pam was guilty when she shot Gumpenberger, apparently trying to protect her rug from blood. On August 23, 2016, Pam Hupp was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she was arrested, she asked to use the restroom and then attempted to take her own life by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she failed. Pam made her first court appearance on January 30, 2017, where St. Charles County Assistant Prosecutor Phil Groenweg argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. Pam Hupp was convicted on all charges by a grand jury in December 2016 and was given a $2 million bail. Her trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to seek the death penalty. They argued that she had made a decision to target Gumpenberger as her victim. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, effectively withdrawing her request for a jury trial and avoiding the death penalty. Following her guilty plea, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. After her sentencing, Pam called her then-husband, Matt Hupp, and admitted to killing Louis Gumpenberger to spare their family the ordeal of a distressing trial. The trial exposed a disturbing aspect of Pam's character, revealing a shocking truth that horrified the police, judges, and the entire nation. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Faria could be presented in court, leading to the reopening of the Betsy Faria case. Betsy Faria, born Elizabeth K. Meyer Faria, resided in Troy, Missouri, where she worked alongside Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator. In 2010, Betsy was diagnosed with cancer, and by October 2011, she had discovered that it had spread to her liver, leaving her with only a few months to live. Prior to her death, on December 22, 2011, Betsy altered the sole beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy, replacing her husband, Russ Faria, with Pam Hupp, without informing him or their daughters of the change. Pam later claimed that Betsy had instructed her to establish a trust fund for her daughters until they came of age. However, Pam subsequently alleged that Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself, citing a previously undisclosed romantic relationship between the two women before Betsy's death. Betsy's daughters became suspicious and took Pam to court in 2014, but their attempt to retrieve their mother's life insurance fund from Pam and her husband Matt was dismissed by the court. In 2016, Russ took legal action against State Farm. 5 days after Betsy made Pam Hupp the sole beneficiary of her life insurance policy on December 22, 2011, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Siteman Cancer Center, which left her weakened. Afterwards, she went to her mother's house as planned, where Russ was supposed to pick her up or she would stay overnight. However, Pam Hupp unexpectedly arrived at Betsy's mother's house and offered to drive Betsy home, claiming she dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter later stated that her mother missed her call at approximately 7:21 p.m. By 9:40 p.m., Russ made an emergency call to 911, frantically reporting that his wife Betsy had taken her own life. Russ spent the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterwards, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before heading back home. When Russ called for help, the first responders arrived about 10 minutes later. Upon examining the scene, they immediately ruled out the possibility of suicide. Betsy's body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a wrist cut to the bone. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints near the entrance of the house. The estimated time of Betsy's death was determined to be between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Fingers pointed to Russ Faria as the main suspect after his wife's murder. Authorities believed he had a motive due to being denied $150,000. Russ was arrested a day after the murder and charged with first-degree murder, despite claiming innocence. A pair of blood-stained slippers were found in his closet, and he failed a polygraph test. The police deemed his demeanor suspicious and erratic. Russ's bail was set at $250,000, which he couldn't pay, so he was jailed until his November 18th trial. Pam told police Russ was violent, a heavy drinker, and had threatened Betsy before. With a $150,000 motive, it was easy to suspect him. Russ's trial was an extremely challenging and brutal process. According to his lawyer Joel Schwartz, Russ maintained his innocence, stating that he was with friends on the night in question, and they corroborated his alibi. Furthermore, Russ had purchased food from a store, making it practically impossible for him to have committed the crime in question. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends were in on it, lying about his whereabouts and maybe even helping him. The judge, Christina Menem, refused to let Schwartz present evidence pointing to an alternative suspect, Pam, despite strong evidence of her motive and suspicious behavior. She claimed to have put $100,000 from insurance into a trust fund for her sister's daughters, but later admitted to keeping it for herself. She didn't want others to have it, so she implied she wanted someone else to have it. A detective reported a crime scene camera malfunction, causing key photos to be lost. Despite the odds, Russ was convicted of murder and armed criminal action, sentenced to life plus 30 years. Before Russ's retrial, her lawyer obtained the photos showing no blood trail. He's still trying to find out who sent them to him. Betsy Pam's case took a welcome turn during re-examination. At trial, her sister Camp testified that Russ was devastated when his wife removed him from her insurance policy. Russ had pressed a pillow to Camp's face. Russ's friends were accused of being accessories to murder, but no charges were filed. After 4 years in prison, Russ's attorney appealed the conviction in 2015. However, a judge rejected a review of the case in 2013. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reinvestigated the case, unveiling suspicious facts about Betsy's death and the killer's identity. Pam Hupp's alibi was discredited due to contradictory statements, and it was revealed she lied about not being in the Furia home. The fact that Pam was completely forgotten about in the murder case was not only shocking to Schwartz and Russ, but some members of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department had also been confused as to why Pam was not being investigated as a possible suspect in the case. In an interview, an officer had shared how shocked he was when no one was looking in Pam's direction. Everyone had been fixated on Russ. Media exposed prosecuting attorney ASI's effort to imprison Russ, revealing her relationships with the captain of investigations Mike Lang and a lead investigator prosecuting witness. This led to a retrial in 2015 with a new judge, Christina Menem, initially presiding. After Menem's recusal, Judge Stephen R. granted a new bench trial and released Russ on bond. Schwartz presented evidence against Pam, revealing she told police she saw Russ with another man. CSI agent Amy Buhner believed Russ's blood-stained slippers were planted evidence. Russ was acquitted in 2015 and later sued ASI and deputies for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating their own. Russ was surprised by the speedy exoneration. Russ won a $2 million settlement in 2020. ASI faced a bar complaint from Joel Schwartz, but it was rejected in 2016. In 2017, ASI cooperated with the U.S. Attorney's review of Betsy Faria's case and asked for an independent probe into her conduct, but was cleared of any wrongdoing. Judge Christina Menem was suspended in 2017 for misconduct. She and ASI were later voted out for mishandling the Betsy Faria murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed Mike Wood as the new attorney, who reopened the case, inspired by Russ Ferris's wrong conviction. After Pam Hupp's Alford plea, Wood requested a review by the major case squad. The case also motivated Rick Harold to run for Lincoln County Sheriff in 2020. Pam Hupp was questioned as a suspect in Betsy Faria's murder in July 2021. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. The prosecutor sought the death penalty due to the brutal nature of the crime, which included 55 stab wounds and a severely cut wrist. Evidence against Pam included a $150,000 life insurance policy, which she claimed for herself despite promising to put it in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter. Pam Hupp claimed she and Betsy were lovers in 2021 and that Betsy wanted more than friendship. She betrayed Betsy, saying Betsy had a crush on her. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought Pam murdered Betsy, stabbing her 55 times with a kitchen knife while she slept. Pam then used her socks to spread footprints, trying to appear as domestic violence. Pam Hupp's case file linked her to Betsy Faria's murder. Despite claiming to be home by 7:20 p.m., Pam's call records showed she was still at Betsy's. Betsy's body position suggested she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty in 2022, but her trial was delayed due to her attorney's death. It's now set to begin in 2025 and last about a month. Prosecutor Mike Wood thought the case against Pam Hupp was mishandled from the start, with bias against Russ Faria in his second trial. A 2015 destruction order could have erased key evidence, luckily overlooked, ensuring Faria's release. The case of Soraya Sierra. Soraya Sierra was born on November 9, 1979, in New York, the second of 3 children in a large family. She grew up with her older brother David and younger sister Christina. Her parents, Dennis and Bethany Jimenez, were of Puerto Rican descent and had immigrated to the United States in 1973, settling in Manhattan, where their children were born. After moving, the couple joined a local Protestant community and converted to evangelical Christianity. They raised their children in a strict environment, adhering to the religious principles of their adopted faith. The family was regular churchgoers, socialized with other community members, and the children attended Sunday school. Soraya was an active and creative person who stood out for her strong will and complex personality. Unlike her younger sister Christina, who was quiet, obedient, and modest, Soraya was seen as a rebellious and mischievous individual. However, she still respected her parents and acknowledged their authority. In the Jimenez household, there were strict rules that everyone followed. These rules governed daily routines, everyday moments, and behavioral norms. For instance, the daughters were not allowed to interact with boys, go on dates, or stay out past 9 p.m. All their friendships were monitored, and their parents always knew who they were with and where. As a result, Soraya's life revolved around home, school, and church, and her social circle was limited to people she met in those places. Soraya, active, energetic, socially oriented girl, was bored and cramped within the framework in which she was kept, but her parents were sure that they were doing the right thing for the good of their children. During her school years, Soraya planned to enter a pedagogical university and become a teacher in the field of culture or arts. But closer to the end of her studies, she became interested in psychology and began to think about connecting her future profession with this field of activity. At a religious community meeting, a young woman named Soraya caught the eye of Stephen Sierra, a man 7 years her senior. He was the first to approach her, finding an excuse to chat. Soraya was just 18 at the time, and with her parents' approval, the two started dating. Stephen made a good impression on Dennis and Bethley, who thought he was a decent, polite, and honest suitor for their daughter. Though Soraya wasn't deeply in love with Stephen, she agreed to marry him, largely to gain independence from her parents' household and strict control. Despite having a good relationship with her parents, Soraya yearned for the freedom to make her own choices and shape her own future. Less than a year after they met, Soraya and Stephen got married in February 1999. At the time, Soraya was 19 years old and Stephen was 26. After the wedding, they moved to Michigan, where Stephen's parents lived. This was a big change for Soraya, who had spent most of her life in her native New York. The new surroundings seemed to invigorate her, and she threw herself into making their new house a home, enjoying new friendships, and exploring the local area. She got a job as a receptionist at a dental office and started thinking about pursuing a college degree. Soraya soon became pregnant and gave birth to 2 children, a boy and a girl. As a result, she had to put her plans to attend university on hold, as she was fully devoted to motherhood and found joy in it. A couple of years later, the Sierra family, now with 2 young children, made another move, this time to sunny California, where they settled in the charming Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles. There, Stephen was offered a job opportunity. However, it soon became clear that his earnings were insufficient to support their lifestyle. After discussing their situation, they decided to return to New York, eventually settling into a modest rented apartment located near the home of the Jimenez family. At that time, the couple, Soraya and her husband, were struggling with serious financial issues. With Soraya staying at home to take care of the children, her husband had to make do with irregular income, which led to periodic debt. However, things started to look up when the children began attending school, and Soraya landed a job at an advertising agency. Around the same time, Stephen found a stable job as a bus driver on one of the city routes. In her late 20s, with the children grown and their lives stable, Soraya revived her long-held plans to pursue higher education. Unlike her earlier interest in pedagogy, she now opted for the psychology faculty at a local university. However, Soraya soon lost enthusiasm for her studies, finding the lengthy lectures dull and uninspiring. She decided to explore alternative fields, seeking a profession that would excite, inspire, and allow her to express herself. Since Soraya was a creative person with a talent for drawing and finding beauty everywhere, she became fascinated with photography. She joined a renowned New York photography community to develop her skills, and it soon became apparent that she had a real gift. Her ability to select the perfect angles and craft harmonious compositions produced stunning, beautiful shots. Even professionals praised her work for its creativity and vision. On the advice of her colleagues, Soraya created a social media page in early 2012, where she began posting her work. It didn't take long for her to gain a massive following, with thousands of users subscribing to her profile and enthusiastically commenting on each piece. In just a few months, she became a star, and her subscriber count continued to grow exponentially. The sudden fame left her feeling dizzy. Soraya felt a strong desire to achieve more and improve her skills, so she proposed organizing a group photo tour to search for unique and breathtaking locations around the world. Soraya Sierra began by taking short trips within her native country, where she developed a specialty in capturing architectural ensembles and historical monuments through her lens. Her photographs garnered great success, which fueled her desire to explore further. She set her sights on Istanbul, one of the world's most ancient and beautiful cities, intent on photographing its iconic landmarks and historical sites. Although her parents were hesitant about her traveling abroad for the first time, Soraya was resolute. They were concerned about her venturing out alone, away from home for an extended period. To alleviate their worries, Soraya agreed to be accompanied by her close friend, Magdalena. However, what her family didn't know was that they were going through a tumultuous time, and Soraya's relationship with her husband was on the brink of collapse. It's possible that her desire to embark on a photography tour on the other side of the world was, in part, a coping mechanism. She yearned to escape her situation, gain a fresh perspective, and reflect on her family's troubles from a distance. After feeling confined for too long, Soraya felt an overwhelming need to break free and do something that nourished her soul during that difficult period. Soraya's relatives were worried that she would be traveling by herself to a foreign country on the other side of the ocean. But she calmed their fears by promising to keep in touch daily through phone calls, letters, and photos. Besides, Soraya had already lined up commercial photography projects in Germany and Austria, which were part of her meticulously planned itinerary. In fact, her whole trip was carefully timetabled, with every hour accounted for, leaving no room for spontaneity or changes. On January 7, 2013, Soraya boarded a flight from New York to Istanbul with limited cash, a smartphone, a tablet, and a DSLR camera with professional lenses. After arriving, she called her family to let them know she had landed safely and was heading to check into a budget hotel she had booked in advance, located in a remote and apparently unsafe area. It later emerged that Soraya was not alone in Istanbul. She was accompanied by a young man named Tylan, whom she had met on social networks in mid-2012. Tylan was the one who had persuaded her to fly to Turkey for several months. During this time, they had been in close contact and had developed a strong bond. Soraya had complete faith in her new friend, and they spent almost every day together, exploring the city's attractions. As a native of Istanbul, Tylan was intimately familiar with the city and organized exciting trips to the most interesting and sometimes unusual places. After Turkey, Soraya traveled to Europe for commercial photo shoots, staying with longtime subscribers to save on hotels. In Vienna, she met a young man who shared her passion for photography and hosted her for 2 days. The trip went as planned, with Soraya visiting each destination and meeting everyone on her schedule. On January 21st, 2013, Soraya finished her photo tour and called her parents and husband to let them know her flight details for New York. As she had never spent so much time away from home before, everyone was relieved her trip was ending. However, before departing, Soraya decided to take a final stroll around the city to capture some last-minute photos for her account. When Soraya's father arrived at the airport to pick her up, she was nowhere to be found among the passengers. Her phone was also unreachable, and all attempts to contact her failed. Concerned, her father approached the airline representatives, who informed him that no passenger by her name was on the flight. Soraya's husband, Stephen, immediately contacted her Istanbul hotel, where he was told that her belongings remained in the room and she hadn't checked out, despite being due to do so the previous day. She was also absent from the hotel for the second day. This news sparked panic among the family, who were left wondering where Soraya was and what to do next. Stephen decided to investigate his wife's accounts and what he found shocked him: a suspicious correspondence with a man named Tylen. Despite his reservations, Stephen opted to reach out to Tylen directly to get to the bottom of things. Tylen claimed to have seen the missing woman just a day before she was supposed to depart, and surprisingly, she hadn't even bothered to call him beforehand, despite her earlier promise. Soraya's family promptly notified the American embassy in Turkey about the incident, and a large-scale search operation was launched the following day. A special unit was formed to handle the operation. Soraya's husband and parents flew to Istanbul soon after, deciding to personally oversee the search efforts, given the short time that had passed since her disappearance and the high likelihood of finding her alive. The police investigation began by looking into Soraya's social circle and speaking with people who had seen her shortly before she vanished. The hotel staff where she stayed, including her friend Tylen, were questioned. The hotel manager reported that he last saw Soraya the night before she disappeared, when she left with a small bag and a camera. She was supposed to check out later, but never returned to the hotel. The next morning, the hotel received a call from her worried husband, who informed them that Soraya's belongings and documents were still at the hotel. The receptionist also described the clothes Soraya was wearing on the day she went missing. Taran introduced himself as Tyran, but his true identity was later revealed. He declined to explain the alias, and it was discovered he'd been in close contact with Soraya for months, even inviting her to Istanbul. Despite this, Taran denied a romantic relationship, claiming they were just friends. The investigation retraced Soraya's steps via cell phone data and CCTV footage. She took the subway to Sultanahmet, visited the promontory, and then went to Eminönü Market, getting lost in the crowd. She reappeared on the subway, heading to Hagia Sophia, but soon vanished again, sparking concern. The search team decided to investigate the Hagia Sophia ruins, hoping to find someone who had seen a lone woman with a camera. After several hours of searching, they finally found a body, but it wasn't the outcome they had hoped for. Near the ancient Constantinople walls, they discovered the lifeless body of a young woman, covered with an old, dirty blanket that had hidden it from view. The investigators suspected that Soraya had been brought to this location, wrapped in that blanket. Forensic experts estimated that the body had been there for 10 to 12 days before its discovery. The lower part of the body was found unclothed, suggesting an act of violence, which was later confirmed by the experts. The autopsy revealed that Soraya had died from a severe blow to the head with a heavy, blunt object. Additionally, her body showed multiple bruises and 2 broken ribs. Pathologists also found skin particles and blood under Soraya's fingernails, indicating that she had fought back and scratched her attacker. The crime scene was both strange and absurd because, despite the thief stealing the victim's bag, smartphone, and camera, they left her gold earrings, wedding ring, and expensive watch, which immediately drew attention. The only lead from the area's camera footage was a young woman resembling Soraya filming something on her phone, followed by a man who either hit or pushed her, and then both disappeared from view. The attacker's identity remained unknown. Media leaks sparked scandal concerns. Investigators stay mum as bodies found, adding to mystery. Questions emerge. Why did the young married woman travel solo to Istanbul? How did she fund it? Initially, suspects included a lover and another acquaintance, but both deny involvement. Later, it emerged that the Viennese man who had given Soraya shelter had a criminal past, sparking speculation that he might have exploited the American as a drug mule. However, a thorough investigation disproved this theory. There were also whispers that Soraya could have been secretly working for U.S. intelligence, gathering intel in other countries, but this possibility was deemed unlikely. With a warrant in hand, police searched Talsali's home, collecting a DNA sample that matched the skin particles and seminal fluid found on the victim's body, confirming his guilt. Furthermore, the victim's phone was last active in the same neighborhood where Talsali lived. When the authorities discovered that the criminal had escaped to Syria, they lost all hope of capturing him. However, they received an unexpected surprise when Tal Sali was arrested while attempting to illegally cross the border back into Turkey. After joining the Syrian rebels and acquiring weapons, he was injured in the conflict and decided it would be safer to return home. In the end, he was caught trying to bring his weapon back with him, which led to his initial arrest. When Tal Sali was questioned, he gave a disturbingly detailed account of what happened. He claimed to have been on a hiking trail along the walls of Shebeku when he saw a young woman, Soraya, taking pictures. He admired her from a distance for a few minutes, then approached her. Despite the language barrier, he tried to communicate with her using gestures, but failed to understand what she wanted. What caught his attention, however, was her brand new iPhone and expensive camera. As Soraya walked away, Tal Sali followed her, intent on robbing her. With night falling and no one else in sight, he saw an opportunity. When Soraya turned around and took a picture of him, Tal Sali became enraged and attacked her, hitting her on the head with a boulder. The two of them rolled down the wall, causing Soraya severe injuries, including bruises and broken ribs. After rendering Soraya unconscious, Tal Sali committed violent and intimate acts against her. He then delivered another severe blow to her head to kill her. Tal Sali stole Soraya's bag, camera, and phone and left the scene. On his way, he found a discarded blanket and returned to cover Soraya's body with it. By then, it was dark, and the chances of running into someone at the wall were minimal. Once he returned, he dragged the body to the side, positioning it so it wouldn't be visible from the nearby hiking path. He then covered it with a blanket and left the scene. During the search for the American woman, the perpetrator surprisingly revisited the crime scene to ensure she was dead and that her body remained where he had left it. When Tal Sali found out through the news that his victim's body had been discovered, he realized the police would soon be on his tail. So he decided to flee the country, borrowing money from his sister, who had always felt sorry for him. Incidentally, he was unable to benefit from the stolen goods, as the camera was damaged during the fall, and the smartphone was locked with a password he couldn't crack. As a result, he discarded the stolen items, including the signal, when he went on the run. The defendant showed no remorse, and DNA evidence placed him at the crime scene. Skin under the victim's nails, seminal fluid on her body. His phone was last used near his home, and a video recording caught the attack. After all the evidence was presented, the decision was made to conduct a psychiatric examination, driven by the suspicion that Tal Sali might be insane, given the disturbing nature of his actions, behavior, and the unsettling calmness with which he graphically described the atrocities he had perpetrated. Nevertheless, the experts ultimately concluded that he was of sound mind and fully cognizant of his actions when he attacked his victim in the summer of 2014. Judge Ely delivered the final verdict, finding Tal Sali guilty on all counts and sentencing him to life imprisonment. Soraya's relatives considered this decision fair and just. Following the necessary expert examinations, the body of the murdered American woman was transported back to her homeland in New York, with all related costs borne by Turkish Airlines. Soraya was laid to rest in a ceremony that respected all religious rites and traditions. Soraya's family created a memorial website in her honor, where they published her previously unseen works. The photos proved to be extremely popular, attracting buyers from all over the world. The money raised from the sale of these pictures was set aside to fund college education for orphan children. Stephen, Soraya's husband, categorically denied that his family life was in crisis, which could have led Soraya to take that fateful trip. Shortly after, Stephen grew close to a girl from the Christian community who supported him during this difficult time, often visiting his home to help with his children and household chores. Just 2 weeks before the first anniversary of Soraya's funeral, Stephen married his new partner. By the time Tal Sali was finally sentenced, Stephen was already married and preparing to become a father again. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the 3 of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship. He considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoebox, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in a car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. The case of the Ortega family. Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figaro Alara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. After her studies, Paula actively contributed to the growth of her family's business, which specialized in party goods manufacturing. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and renowned in Sangolquí and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's dad built a successful party goods business in Ecuador, producing balloons, piñatas, and more. The family opened stores in Sangolquí and Quito, with each member contributing. Paula managed a store and started a party planning service, which flourished, bringing joy to people and fulfilling her. Paula Ortega's personal life struggled despite her family's business success. Her first marriage to Carlos Pedro was unhappy due to his alcoholism, infidelity, and theft. After their daughter's birth, Carlos's behavior worsened, leading Paula to end the marriage. With family support and her passion for work, Paula regained a sense of normalcy and hope. A decade after her previous experiences, Paula met Christian Diego, a tall, dark-haired, and handsome man who was 4 years her junior. Despite having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was initially cautious around Christian, who was persistent in his pursuit of her. However, Christian soon won her over with his calm and reliable nature, forming a strong bond with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed her. After 2 years of dating, Paula's heart finally warmed up to Christian, and they decided to tie the knot in a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian took on a paternal role, embracing Paula's daughter as his own, and soon they welcomed another daughter, Maria, into their family. During their 5-year marriage, Christian fully integrated into Paula's father's company, taking on a key role in finding locations for new stores. This job frequently required him to travel, leaving Paula and their daughters at home. Coming from a humble working-class background, Christian had always harbored ambitions of owning a large business one day. Unfortunately, some individuals are skilled at hiding their dark side, and it's possible to live alongside ruthless criminals for years without ever suspecting a thing. But the truth always has a way of revealing itself, often in the most unexpected and explosive ways. Paula Ortega and her husband Christian seemed like the perfect couple to those around them, with a happy and successful relationship. But beneath the surface, things were not as they appeared. After Paula's father passed away in 2020 following a long illness, the family's business began to fall apart. Christian, driven by a desire for power and wealth, tried to take Paula's father's place, but his lack of business skills led to a string of failed deals. Frustrated, Christian started taking out his anger on his family, initially in secret, but soon openly abandoning them for a life of partying and recklessness. Without Paula's father to keep him in check, Christian's true nature began to emerge, marked by a string of affairs and heavy drinking. Paula was determined not to repeat the mistakes of her previous traumatic marriage, and she refused to tolerate Christian's abusive behavior. Their home had become a war zone, with Christian's true nature, an ambitious egoist who craved power and obedience, on full display. After a particularly vicious argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing Christian's reaction. However, when Christian discovered her plans, his behavior abruptly changed. Desperate to maintain his position in the family and avoid losing his comfortable lifestyle, he reformed his ways and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be confused and overwhelmed, and professed his love and appreciation for his family. Paula, still hesitant to be alone again, was convinced by Christian's eloquence to give him another chance. Christian suggested a romantic dinner at home, and Paula agreed, sending their daughters to her parents' house to prepare for the evening. Despite her reservations, she was excited to recreate a happy family atmosphere. The evening at the Ortega home was filled with celebration and comfort. The living room was decorated with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly lit by candles. Christian poured a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night seemed to be a genuine step towards reconciliation, until Christian suddenly made a shocking proposal that disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. Christian confessed to his wife a costly mistake in his bid to take over the family business, causing significant losses. The company now needed a new investor, which would mean giving up part of the firm. Paula refused to consider it, wanting her father's business to stay in the family. Despite his efforts, she wouldn't budge, leaving Christian frustrated and their relationship strained. On January 2nd, 2023, Paula took her daughter to the playroom before preparing for work at her shop. She had a large order to fulfill, involving balloon fountains and party decorations. During lunch, two slim men in dark hoodies arrived. Paula opened the door, expecting a courier. The men startled her, scanned the shop, and pinned her against the wall. Just as things got tense, a courier knocked on the door, prompting the men to flee. Paula handed over the package, her hands shaking with fear. She closed the shop, then called her mother, her voice trembling as she expressed her fear. Although her mother suggested reporting the incident to the police, Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright, since nothing harmful had occurred. Instead of reopening her shop, Paula spent the day consumed by thoughts of Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the two mysterious men. Seeking comfort, she took a stroll through the city, stopping at a cafe for coffee and walking through the park to clear her head. Later, Paula visited her sister, and they had a heart-to-heart conversation over cups of tea. Overwhelmed by the day's shocking events, Paula confided in her sister about the scary encounter at her shop, as well as her difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and being openly unfaithful. Although she normally kept her personal struggles to herself, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame, allowing her to open up about the demeaning treatment she had been tolerating. Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, later recalled that Paula had spoken about her long-term life plans, including her dreams for her daughters to grow up and become professionals. Adriana also remembered that Paula had expressed her intention to continue running her business. According to Adriana, Paula was a selfless and extremely hard-working person. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. However, Christian called her, saying he was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would stop by the shop to pick Paula up as well. Their conversation was brief, with kids' voices in the background. Paula didn't get a chance to tell Christian about the scary incident at her shop, especially since she suspected he might be involved. Reluctantly, Paula went back to work, putting her family's needs before her own. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't resist her. He told Paula that the kids were at home, eagerly waiting for hamburgers, a modern family tradition. Instead of going to the nearest fast food joint, Christian took Paula to the Courtyard restaurant at a nearby shopping center. He parked the car by a secluded wall, locked it securely, and left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a long and tiring day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the danger that was approaching. Shortly after, she recognized two familiar figures standing near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. She realized they were the same unexpected visitors who had come to her shop earlier. Paula tried to remain calm, trusting that the car was secure and that Christian would return soon. But suddenly, the car's lights flashed, and the door locks disengaged. Panicked, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms, but she was trapped with no way to escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat, while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before everything went dark. The attack left Paula with 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. The assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood, Frantic, he called emergency services, but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give the emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving the necessary medical attention. Christian was overcome with grief and shock after losing his wife Paula, screaming and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The community was stunned, the family devastated, wondering who attacked Paula and why. Initially, the prosecution thought it was a robbery gone wrong, citing the stolen $600 and gold necklace. Security footage showed two men in hoodies visiting her store, but their faces were unclear. 2 months after Paula's death, her family sought justice, but the case stalled. However, Adriana, Paula's sister, revealed a crucial conversation with Paula, which cast doubt on Christian's innocence. She exposed Christian's infidelity and violence, and Paula's consideration of divorce, giving him a motive to kill. The prosecution then searched the couple's home, finding incriminating messages on Christian's phone and a document to transfer the company, which Paula refused to sign. After the incident, Christian was investigated for suspected homicide. New evidence revealed a complex web of deceit in the couple's relationship. 2 weeks later, it was discovered Christian had transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, adding to suspicion. The most shocking aspect was Christian using Paula's account to make a payment while she was dying, instead of helping her. The woman who received the $2,000 transfer from Christian on January 2, 2005, was identified as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. She was questioned by the police and revealed that her bank card had gone missing a couple of days prior, but she hadn't thought much of it since her brother often used it. Despite denying any connection to Christian, Laura's solid alibi during the incident ruled her out as a suspect, and she was released. The case stalled again until Laura returned to police, saying her brother had given back her bank card. She described him, matching one of the surveillance camera images near the crime scene. One attacker had forgotten his hood, revealing Byron and Morton Castillo, repeat offenders with a long criminal record. They were arrested, leaving the question, what linked these criminals to respected family man Christian? Paula Ortega was a victim of a carjacking at a gas station on December 8, 2022. One man distracted her while his accomplice stole her car. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car. Surveillance footage identified the Castillo brothers, who targeted her before. Ironically, Paula had met them earlier that day. Christian's claim that thieves contacted him raised doubts about his innocence. He met them, recovering Paula's belongings, including her wallet. Experienced investigators were puzzled by Christian's boldness. Surveillance cameras identified the carjackers. Christian, under suspicion, created a new defense, claiming the brothers were extorting him. Police questioned suspects separately, telling them one had confessed. Martin Castillo buckled, admitting Christian paid him $2,000 to kill his wife, promising another $2,000 after. In a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal stab wounds. He then calmly revealed the details of the arrangement. Martin also revealed that the theft of Paula's car and the attack on her shop were part of Christian's plan to put pressure on her. As it turned out, Paula lived a few hours longer than Christian had intended, on November 29, 2023. All three suspects appeared in court, where the prosecution presented a clear picture of the events surrounding the murder, pieced together from various sources. Forensic analysis of surveillance camera footage and audio recordings from the area where Christian had parked his car revealed a chilling and disturbing narrative. In a disturbing surveillance video, Christian Diego is seen getting out of his car and walking towards a shopping center elevator. Shortly after, he remotely unlocks his car from about half a block away, allowing two attackers to get in and assault Paula. The prosecutor's report highlights Christian's suspicious behavior after the attack, including repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, stopping, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Remarkably, when he finds his wife bleeding heavily, he shows no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a hospital that is far away. Christian's actions, meticulously recreated from surveillance footage, especially in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, are revealed to be cold and calculated as she remains alive but bleeding in the car. Standing nearby, Christian ruthlessly transfers money to his accomplices for their role in the assault. Paula's family lawyers are urging the court to consider these videos as factors that make the crime even more serious. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves that the crime was planned in advance. Around 1:30 p.m., 2 individuals arrived at Paula's store, which happened to be near Christian's location. This suggests that the crime may have been planned to take place during the lunchtime closure when Paula was alone. However, prosecutor Marlon Calderon pointed out inconsistencies in the story, questioning how the assailants knew the couple would be at the store if they weren't following them, yet still managed to arrive on time to commit the crime. Christian's suspicious behavior, including not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the store, pacing back and forth before helping his wife, making phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic, are key pieces of evidence that implicate him in orchestrating the murder. The trial of Christian and Paula Ortega exposed the dark truth of femicide, the intentional murder of women due to their gender. Despite Paula's professional success, Christian's youthful energy fueled his abuse and contempt towards her. Trapped in her own making, Paula enabled Christian's control until his sinister plot culminated in her tragic death. More than 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, provided testimonies that, along with a thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's real intentions and goals. Without having the legal right to sign documents, Christian tried to force Paula to transfer her company shares to him. However, he failed. Although Christian did not physically harm Paula, he subjected her to severe psychological abuse, which he cleverly disguised as a perfect family life, as stated in the Prosecutor General's report. Video evidence led to Christian being placed in preventive isolation for being the mastermind behind the crimes. This measure is not the same as being arrested, but rather a strategy to neutralize a threat to society. After this action, Christian planned to flee the country. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, who was accused of planning his wife's death, his defense team worked hard to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute key evidence, including surveillance footage and fake company transfer documents. Desperate to avoid conviction, the defense attempted to portray the accused as mentally unstable, citing incidents of sudden rage. However, multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian and deemed him competent to stand trial. As the situation grew dire, his defense counsel suggested he flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and proposing he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. But this escape plan failed when Christian's search for Central American flight tickets alerted the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly detained Christian for 8 hours, then charged him and presented the case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Christian was held in preliminary detention pending trial, accused of being the mastermind behind a brutal act that left 2 young children orphaned and a family grieving the loss of their loved one. The Ortega family demanded justice for this heinous crime, emphasizing its devastating impact on the children and their loss. In a case that captivated public attention, the jury found Christian and his 2 accomplices guilty of a meticulously planned and intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful trio was sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Ruminahui offer their condolences to the family and friends of Paula Alcácer, who tragically passed away. They extend their deepest sympathies to those affected by her loss, an esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife who made significant contributions to the canton's development and brought prosperity to those around her. Paula's case highlights the disturbing trend of violence against women, as reported by the Latin American Association for Alternative Developments, which revealed a staggering 332 fatalities in 2022 due to gender-based violence. Some people have great powers that help them solve complex problems regardless of age. For example, the main character in today's story, Tia Hernlin, was born in 2000. Her parents, Julie Hernlin and Aeneas Hernlin, were a couple of surfers with an adventurous spirit they loved for an active lifestyle. They were very close-knit young people who sincerely loved each other. Tia became the embodiment of their romantic feelings, further strengthened their family bond. They dedicated their favorite activities to their daughter, engaged her in sports, and maintained an active lifestyle, which contributed to both their family ties and Tia's spirit. Julie and Aeneas protected their child in every way possible. Tia was creative and active, following her parents' example. She enjoyed sports, loved interacting with children her own age. Tia also easily connected with the older generation, leaving everyone amazed at how mature she was for her age. She also adored animals, so the family welcomed a dog and 3 cats into their home. In 2005, 5-year-old Tia was still attending kindergarten but was preparing to start school the following year, an important and eagerly anticipated milestone for her. Meanwhile, her parents continued to work and build their careers. At 29 years old, Aeneas had begun a new chapter in his career as a manager at the organization where he had worked for many years. His wife, Julie, was planning to finish her studies soon. A few years prior, she had enrolled in law school at a community college in Daytona Beach, Florida, where they all lived. With just 2 months left before receiving her diploma, Julie was close to fulfilling her dream of practicing law. She intended to become a paralegal to gain the necessary experience and improve further in her field. It all seemed like the idyllic American dream, at least until March 28, 2005. On that early Monday morning, law enforcement officials received an alarming call. A child had contacted 911. At first, the coordinator thought it could be a joke or mistake, but continued to listen to her story. Tia mentioned finding blood in her parents' room and that her parents did not respond when she called for them. She saw her parents lying on the floor in blood and was afraid they were ill, perhaps even dead, so she asked for help. Despite her fear, Tia spoke calmly about the situation. The coordinator realized this was serious, so the police were dispatched immediately. While waiting for their arrival, the dispatcher engaged Tia in conversation, attempting to distract her from panic. The coordinator sought valuable information. Tia mentioned a possible robber, creating the risk that a stranger might still be in the house. However, Tia assured the operator that there were no guests expected that evening, explaining that she had been woken by strange noises, at least 2 bangs that sounded like gunshots. When she went to her parents' room, no one was there, and that was when she found their bodies. Tia immediately thought to call emergency services when she saw the suspicious red splashes. Fortunately, her parents had taught her how to dial 911, a quick action that could potentially save their lives. For a 5-year-old girl, she maintained an impressive level of calm. She informed the coordinator that, apart from her, there was a dog and 3 cats in the house. About 3 minutes after this exchange, the responding officers arrived outside the door. The coordinator informed Tia of this, and she opened the door for them. The police were astonished that the entire conversation had been held with a 5-year-old child who could provide such detailed and coherent information. Tia's calm demeanor ultimately contributed not only to her safety but also to the unfolding investigation. As it turned out, she had interpreted everything correctly. In the early morning hours, a stranger had entered their home. Tia pointed out where her parents' bedroom was. There, the police found the bodies of 2 victims. No weapons were found in the parents' bedroom, and it did not appear to be a case of voluntary end of life. 31-year-old Julie was killed on the spot, and it was already impossible to help her. Her husband, 29-year-old Aeneas, was still breathing, but his condition was critical. Paramedics arrived at the scene and took him to hospital after he was attacked in the head by a gun. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts to save him, he died the next day in a Daytona Beach hospital. Tia was left an orphan. The county sheriff held a press conference to inform the public about the attack and the brave little girl who had survived a real hell. The local community was worried about Tia, but for a 5-year-old, she appeared to be doing fairly well. Child psychologists worked with her, while detectives were in no hurry to talk to Tia about what had happened, as they were still analyzing the information they had collected and didn't want to further traumatize her. They were most concerned about the long-term consequences of the horror she had experienced. After all, at just 5 years old, Tia still didn't fully understand what had happened. In any case, her handling of the situation was impressive and garnered a significant response from the local community. The reaction to the press conference was quite controversial. On one hand, the 5-year-old girl was able to pull herself together, call the police, and meet the patrolman in the house while caring for her injured parents. On the other hand, people were outraged at how this situation could have happened. It was remarkable that Tia managed to provide all the necessary information during the call and remain composed. She communicated with the coordinator and practically did not panic. The actions of the coordinator were also highly praised. In an attempt to understand what happened in the house, detectives launched an investigation to quickly find the criminal and ensure safety on the streets. Additionally, it was believed that Tia could be in danger while the criminal was at large. The motive behind the attack was unclear. It was possible that he could return for her. The bedroom where Tia's parents died was carefully examined, and a cartridge case was found there. They were apparently sleeping, and were shot at close range. They had not even had the time to react. Signs of a break-in were found in the house, leading the authorities to initially consider the case as a robbery gone wrong. However, this assumption was quickly refuted, as nothing was missing from the Hernland family home, and the victims died in the same positions in which they had been sleeping. This meant that they had not had time to catch the criminal off guard, which forced him to kill them. It seemed that the assailant's only target was, in fact, Julie and Aeneas. Immediately after shooting both of them, he simply left the house. It was evident that this attack was very personal, so detectives began assessing the immediate circle of the victims to see who might have hated them enough to want them dead. The Hernlands seemed like nice, friendly people who avoided conflict. They were athletes, had no banned substance addictions, and did not abuse alcohol, drinking only occasionally on holidays. Aeneas and Julie had never been known to have any criminal connections, aside from a few traffic fines, and they had no problems with the law. This only made the search more challenging. Detectives went from neighbor to neighbor, interviewing local residents in the hope that someone could provide valuable clues. Those close to the victim spoke of a suspicious neighbor who lived nearby. Both had repeatedly complained about issues with this man. It was David Edward Johnson, a 33-year-old man who, according to several witnesses, had a very erratic temperament. At an early stage of the investigation, no one could provide any specific information about his behavior, so the police decided to talk to him personally. However, when they knocked on his door, he did not answer. There was no evidence against him at that time, and at least a search or arrest warrant would have been needed, which they did not yet have. Consequently, the police were forced to leave empty-handed but decided to investigate this man further while he was still potentially on the run. As it turned out, David had repeatedly had run-ins with the law. However, until that point, there had been no violent incidents. His convictions were minor and related to banned substance use and possession, although more disturbing details emerged. Investigators found that shortly before the tragedy, the Hernlands had tried to obtain a restraining order against their neighbor. This occurred back in January, 3 months before the double murder, when Julie went to court due to David's alarming behavior. In particular, on the day before the hearing, David drove past their house and shouted several threats at them. While the police were trying to determine any connection between these events, David Johnson was found in his home with no signs of life. When the police arrived in the area, they discovered him dead from a single gunshot wound to the head, with a gun lying next to him. The approximate time of death was determined to be the same day. He had taken his own life within a few hours of Aeneas and Julie's murder. This is why he did not open the door to the detective when he first visited the house. Ballistics tests were conducted, confirming that Aeneas, Julie, and David were attacked with the same gun, the same pistol that was found in David's house. Evidence indicated that the main suspect, having disputes with his neighbors, had taken his own life. After finding David's body, forensic experts conducted a thorough examination. Detectives hoped to find clues that would help them understand what led to this tragic outcome and the simultaneous deaths of 3 individuals. The most disturbing evidence that the police managed to find was a collection of newspaper clippings related to an arrest in November. They were pinned to the refrigerator door, and, in addition, documents related to the trial were lying in plain sight. It was discovered that all of this was connected to the same episode. It is likely that David blamed his neighbors, the Hernland family, for his troubles. Hatred and paranoia were evident in David's behavior. Everyone who knew him well was aware that he regularly used banned substances. A toxicological examination was conducted, which confirmed that at the time of the crime, he was in a state of severe intoxication from illegal substances, apparently using them to suppress feelings of fear or, conversely, falling into paranoid delirium due to their use, which ultimately led him to take up arms. Unfortunately, it was not possible to reliably ascertain the motive for the attack since there was no suicide note in the house. Consequently, the detectives delved deeper into matters related to the restraining order. Now, they needed to understand what could have made David harbor such intense hatred for his neighbors, who appeared to be a nice, harmless couple. It was found that David Johnson had encountered further legal troubles. The police raided his house and discovered several bushes of illegal plants. He had converted his basement into a makeshift garden for growing marijuana. Following this incident, he began experiencing more problems with the law. The police sought to determine whether these issues could be connected to the double murder, so they interviewed David's closest associates. Several friends, including individuals connected to the criminal world, provided a crucial insight. David blamed his neighbors for reporting him to law enforcement. There was no reason to accept this claim, as Julie and her husband had never visited his house to see the illegal plants. However, David was convinced that the Hernlands had instigated his troubles. Detectives investigated this statement, leading to a search at his address. However, the findings did not corroborate David's assumptions. The Hernlands were truly uninvolved, the caller was someone else entirely, and the plants that had been discovered in David's home were found purely by accident. No one was actively seeking to find them. In November 2004, a report was received by the police regarding a burglary at a neighboring house. David was investigated since he had previously had legal issues. They merely wanted to check his involvement. During a search of his residence, illegal plants and steroids were discovered accidentally. It seemed David was not making much effort to hide them, and one of the officers simply caught a distinct smell. David's hatred and suspicion towards Aeneas and Julie were entirely unfounded. However, this erroneous belief became the catalyst for a future tragedy. Due to his delusions, David developed a deep-seated animosity towards they, rendering him fixated on seeking revenge. That is why he began threatening Aeneas and Julie. David did not articulate a coherent reason for his animosity. Instead, he began to harass the neighbors. He repeatedly approached Aeneas and Julie on the street, accusing them of stalking him, a claim that bewildered they, as they were not persecuting him. Although they had genuine concerns regarding his potential ties to crime and banned substance use, they chose not to involve the police, believing it was none of their business. Julie often spoke to her friends and family about David's odd behavior. As the tragedy approached, these conversations became increasingly frequent. Julie felt immense pressure and fear. By December 2004, she began documenting all the incidents in her diary, noting the date, time, and detailed descriptions of her neighbors' behavior. By January of the following year, these threats had escalated to a continuous pattern, causing serious concern for the Hernland family. David began to appear near the Hernland family's home with increasing frequency, despite the fact that it was situated in a dead-end street, and he had no legitimate reason to be there. His actions grew more intrusive and frightened the Hernland family, leading to dozens of entries detailing his disturbing behavior. Julie regarded these as strong evidence that would convince a judge of David's dangerousness and justify her request for a restraining order. They had exhausted their patience and were genuinely frightened, prompting Julie to turn to the courts. Unfortunately for them, the judge presiding over the case rejected the motion, concluding that no violence had occurred on David's part. He had not physically attacked them but limited himself to verbal threats. It was impossible to prove the fact of persecution based on the accusations and evidence provided. Julie returned home empty-handed, without a restraining order. Only the sheriff did not stand aside. He spoke to David, warning that if he did not back down, Hernland's repeated statements could lead to something more serious. The refusal to issue a restraining order caused real despair for Julie. She was considering changing her place of residence, but that would take time. She turned to her friend Michelle on the very day she learned of the verdict. Julie was so frightened by her neighbor's behavior that she told Michelle that if something happened to her, only David could be to blame. Her friend tried to calm her down in every possible way, but her words proved to be prophetic. She had only a week left to live, as did her husband. David was notified of the neighbors' attempts to obtain a restraining order, which only confirmed his delusion that they held a grudge against him and wanted to put him behind bars. Probably from that moment on, a murder plan began to form in his mind, which he later executed. During a press conference, the sheriff confirmed that the neighbors' conflict had indeed taken place. Tensions were rising, however, no one expected David to take up arms. There were no obvious prerequisites or serious quarrels, so everything died down until that fateful night. The authorities concluded that an unfortunate combination of circumstances, abuse of a prohibited drug, and emotional stress had driven David to madness. Once again, having used the prohibited drug, he decided to eliminate the people he considered a threat to his freedom. Fortunately, he did not intend to kill the child, but perhaps he simply forgot about her presence in the house. He left quickly and did not come face to face with Tia. It is difficult to say how this tragedy would have ended if the 5-year-old girl had immediately left her room upon waking up just a few minutes after the shots were fired. Upon returning home, David sobered up a little and likely realized the full gravity of the crime he had committed. Perhaps he was afraid that the police, who arrived in response to the call, would find him, leading him to decide to take his own life. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, David lost control of his emotions and attacked himself in the head. It all seemed like a monstrous act of cruelty fueled by the delusions and addictions of a criminal. The killer was found, and the case was closed. However, this was just the beginning for Tia, a brave little girl who witnessed her parents being attacked but did not lose her composure and called for help. In the wake of the tragedy and the helplessness of the judicial system, the public revolted. Citizens across the nation learned about this terrible incident that could have been prevented and once again questioned the effectiveness of the protection system and the authorities' powerlessness. Numerous proposals emerged to improve the system, emphasizing a need for stricter punishments. Even the fact that the criminal had voluntarily taken his own life and no longer posed a threat to society did not suit the local population. People began to doubt the effectiveness of the laws. Concerned citizens and lawyers joined in. Journalists eagerly fanned the flames of the controversy. Many experts participated in discussions about what happened, but these conversations did not lead to any concrete actions. The fate of Tia became a pressing issue. People worried about what would happen to her next, and many offered to take her into their families. Tia found solace among relatives. After the tragedy and her communication with the authorities, she was taken in by her grandparents, who lived in Central Florida. She received words of support from the entire local community and became a sort of celebrity despite her young age. People did not want to limit themselves to just words, understanding that Tia might face financial difficulties in the future. Without parental support, her elderly grandparents could no longer provide everything she needed, especially in education. Although her relatives did not ask for financial assistance, compassionate individuals took the initiative to create a trust fund in her name. The extensive media coverage of this tragedy helped attract attention and gather much-needed resources. Furthermore, Tia would be able to receive funds upon reaching adulthood. However, even this was not what allowed Tia to survive the loss of her loved ones. It was her strength of character. Now an adult, Tia sincerely believes that her resilience was possible only thanks to the efforts of her mother and father. She recalled that terrible night very well, as it caused her significant psychological trauma. During their short lives, her parents instilled in her a sense of purpose and a strong character that she managed to demonstrate even at such a young age. This influenced her entire life. Having overcome early difficulties, Tia focused on her studies. During her school years, Tia became a local celebrity but remained modest and did not abuse her popularity. She was interested not only in sports but also in painting and music, which highlighted her creative nature. Moreover, Tia concentrated on academic success, as she dreamed of fulfilling her mother's ambition of becoming a lawyer and helping others. All her teachers spoke of her as a promising child with a great future. School psychologists also worked with her and paid her a little more attention than other children, which was understandable. The transitional period caused the greatest concern, as the traumas she experienced in childhood could manifest in unpredictable ways. But even during this time, Tia remained focused on her studies. She drew and played the guitar. Instead of becoming an unpredictable rebel, she found a new direction and began to help her community. Gradually, her efforts grew into volunteer activities. Tia was very grateful to those who supported her after the tragic loss of her family. Now Tia is 25 years old. She has received a college education and volunteers for several large charities. For these purposes, Tia has begun using social media. Instead of promoting herself, she focuses on supporting others. She shares advice with people who have experienced serious tragedies, helping them cope. She has become an example of courage and selflessness for many, wanting to thank society for its help. She frequently shares her story to exemplify resilience, proving that any difficulties can be overcome. Currently, Tia is quite private and avoids unnecessary attention. In her youth, she attracted media interest, participated in interviews, and often served as an example of the strength of spirit that a person can show. Now, however, she values confidentiality, aware that excessive attention can attract unwanted people into her life. Tia is now a young woman who plans to start a family of her own and hopes to avoid meeting people like David Johnson. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind and loving young woman. Lindsay had a deep-seated need for connection and love. Her major misstep was that she misjudged her partner and invested herself in their toxic relationship. Lindsay was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. Growing up in a loving and supportive family, she had never expected to become a mother so young. Although she was emotionally mature, what made it even more difficult was that her boyfriend, whom she had been dating since she was 13, abandoned her as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. His sudden departure left Lindsay feeling both upset and scared. Lindsay was all too familiar with the physical and financial strains of motherhood. Her family, the Wilsons, were loving and close-knit, but they had often struggled to make ends meet. Despite their financial challenges, Lindsay's parents had always worked hard to provide for their children. When Lindsay met Mitchell, 5 months into her pregnancy, she felt like she had been given a rare gift. Mitchell, who was 20 years old at the time, was attentive, caring, and gentle. What impressed Lindsay most was that her pregnancy didn't deter him. Instead, he was eager to be involved and supportive. Mitchell told Lindsay that he had fallen in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, raising her child as his own. To show his commitment, Mitchell began working overtime to ensure that Lindsay and their unborn child would not have to worry about anything. 20-year-old Mitchell was a true gentleman. He was attentive and loving to Lindsay, despite her delicate condition. In fact, Mitchell had fallen deeply in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, including raising her child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a good income. However, when they announced their decision to get married, their parents were shocked. They felt that their 5-week relationship was too short to withstand the challenges and circumstances that came with marriage. Despite their concerns, Lindsay relatives noticed a positive change in her since being with Mitchell. She had regained her cheerfulness and good health. However, some of them found Mitchell's behavior to be a bit insincere. Nevertheless, no one interfered with their decision to get married, and instead chose to keep their doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995, surrounded by a small, intimate group of family and friends, mostly from the bride's side. The groom's side was noticeably underrepresented, with only his parents, a brother, and 2 friends in attendance. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Lindsay relatives couldn't shake off their uneasy feelings about the union. However, Lindsay herself was over the moon, believing she had found her perfect match. As the evening wore on, their happiness was short-lived. A disagreement erupted, and the newlyweds' argument played out in front of their guests. The reason for Mitchell's outburst seemed trivial, and his reaction was disproportionately intense. The situation escalated, with Mitchell grasping Lindsay's hand and violently shaking her, leaving everyone in attendance stunned and uncomfortable. Mitchell appeared agitated and threatening, causing concern. When he calmed down, he apologized to everyone and made light of the situation, attributing his behavior to holiday stress. Although Lindsay didn't think much of the incident at the time and soon forgot about it, it was actually one of the warning signs of their toxic relationship. After getting married, Mitchell and Lindsay moved into an apartment in Southport, away from their parents. They started their life together and soon welcomed a baby girl named Robin. However, Lindsay soon discovered that her husband had a volatile temper, which cast a shadow over the joy of their new family. Mitchell's moods were unpredictable. One moment he was happy and joking, and the next, he would become aggressive and unreasonable. She thought she was maintaining a delicate balance at home, but in reality, she was giving in to his control. He dictates her every move and gets angry if she misses a phone call or doesn't pick up. Their arguments often ended with Mitchell begging for forgiveness and declaring his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had been restored, but their cycle of arguments became more and more intense. Lindsay struggled to recognize who she once loved. She frequently shared her concerns with her relatives, who urged her to leave the relationship and end her suffering. However, Lindsay found it difficult to acknowledge her mistake and admit defeat. Lindsay's relatives noticed that she often dwelled on memories of the past. Whenever her husband promised to change and return to his gentle and caring ways, Lindsay wanted to believe him and waited for him to fulfill his promises. Meanwhile, Mitchell's controlling behavior intensified. He restricted Lindsay's freedom, forbidding her from going out alone in the evenings and eventually requiring her to be accompanied by him at all times. Despite his possessiveness, Mitchell was seen with other women, sparking Lindsay's suspicions of infidelity. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her concerns, sharing an incident where a woman visited their home, unaware that Mitchell was married. This revelation led to another argument, which escalated into physical violence. Physical abuse gradually became a part of Lindsay's life. To control her and protect his reputation, Mitchell started limiting her interactions with others. He began by restricting her contact with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually with her family. Lindsay, unhappy and fearful of being caught and punished, tried to secretly maintain contact with her loved ones. Despite the problems in their relationship, Lindsay stayed with Mitchell. One reason was the comfortable life he provided. He had a good income, supported her and their child, and paid the bills, leaving her without any financial worries. Lindsay's life changed dramatically when she found herself pregnant again. Although her husband, Mitchell, was a good father to her daughter from a previous relationship, she felt that having another child would be unwise in their current circumstances. She decided to have an abortion. When Mitchell found out about her decision, he became furious and verbally and physically abused her. Lindsay packed her belongings and took her daughter to her parents' home. Her family was relieved to see her. At first, Lindsay was happy to be apart from her husband, Mitchell. But over time, she started to miss him. Mitchell, eager to win her back, would call her constantly, begging her to return. Despite initial reservations, Lindsay was eventually won over by Mitchell's claims that he had changed. Everything seems to be back to normal. They are even looking forward to another child. However, their happiness was short-lived. After 6 months, Mitchell's violent temper flared up again. Although he didn't harm Lindsay, who was pregnant at the time, he unleashed his fury on their apartment. He smashed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and damaged the walls. He even threw their television out the window and vandalized their car. The landlord, fed up with the destruction, demanded that they pay for the damages and move out. The family's financial situation became even more dire. As a result, they was forced to take out a significant loan and downsize to a smaller, more modest apartment. In October 1997, Lindsay gave birth to their son, Jack. Mitchell was overjoyed at the arrival of his child. However, the relationship between the spouses continued to deteriorate over time. Mitchell often left home for extended periods, sometimes for just a few days, sometimes for an entire week, frequently citing trivial or made-up reasons. Although Lindsay had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, she eventually reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, returning to her parents' home when Mitchell abandoned her once again. Lindsay realized she couldn't handle the separation from Mitchell on her own, so she reached out to a local charity that supports women in crisis. The charity helped her find affordable housing in a different city, allowing her to start fresh. However, she was worried that Mitchell would find out her new contact information, so she took steps to protect herself. When Mitchell began making threats, she took it a step further and got a restraining order from the police. With the help of a therapist, Lindsay started rebuilding her life. She kept a journal to document her experiences, intending to use it as a warning for her children in the future, so they wouldn't make the same mistakes she did. The journal entries supported what her relatives had said about the problems within the family. Unfortunately, despite her efforts to stay hidden, Mitchell eventually discovered her phone number and began calling her constantly, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, now free, soon felt lonely and couldn't resist her ex's persistence. They started talking and seeing each other again, eventually moving back in together. Ashamed of her weakness, Lindsay kept this a secret, but it eventually came out. Her relatives and friends were shocked and disappointed by her reunion with he they considered a tyrant, and they couldn't understand why she had taken him back. Her relatives continued to dislike Mitchell and cut off most communication with him. Despite their efforts to help her, Lindsay repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. As a result, her loved ones eventually gave up trying to save her, accepting the situation and distancing themselves. This time, however, Lindsay's decision would prove to have devastating consequences. After Lindsay disclosed her situation, a social worker began monitoring the young family. However, the social worker reported that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell, would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. Despite the social worker's repeated requests to speak directly with Lindsay, Mitchell would make excuses and prevent her from doing so. The social worker would leave her contact information, but Lindsay never returned her calls. The social worker became concerned for Lindsay's safety and requested a welfare check. When law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, they too were unable to speak with Lindsay. Mitchell claimed that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but he did not consider her missing. Mitchell said that Lindsay participated in a party with a friend on Christmas Eve, returning home early in the morning somewhat intoxicated. This led to an argument with Mitchell. Following the argument, Lindsay packed her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. Mitchell claimed Lindsay had left him for another man and no longer wanted to have any contact with him. Mitchell's subsequent media appearances sparked widespread attention. He presented himself as a worried and abandoned husband, pleading for Lindsay to return. However, during these interviews, he also shared intimate details about their marriage, occasionally speaking negatively about his wife. Mitchell believes that Lindsay's actions stemmed from a desire for a lavish lifestyle. He said to have seen her driving an expensive car, which he thought was proof that she had left their children for a wealthy man. Despite her public image, Mitchell was enjoying the freedom of a single life. The search for Lindsay began with conversations with her relatives. During these conversations, it was learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th. At that time, she appeared to be in high spirits and looking well, with her behavior being normal. During their investigation, detectives were surprised that no one had expressed concern about the young wife's whereabouts for 2 months. However, they soon discovered a plausible explanation. Mitchell had a history of limiting his wife's interactions with others, even close relatives. In the past, her family had difficulty staying in touch with her due to Mitchell's controlling behavior, which made it more believable that Lindsay had intentionally kept a low profile for an extended period. The news of Lindsay's disappearance alarmed everyone, despite the initial assumption that she was not the type to be concerned about. She was known for her modest lifestyle and never drank. Additionally, her husband had restricted her from having any contact with the outside world, including friends and acquaintances. Several inconsistencies in Mitchell's statement to the police raised suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would willingly let his wife leave, and that Lindsay would not abandon her children to a controlling husband. To clarify the situation, the police conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing all of Lindsay's acquaintances and searching for anyone who may have seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned their neighbors and obtained surveillance footage from the residential complex and surrounding areas. Lindsay's disappearance was not immediately noticed, and by the time it was. However, investigators later discovered that she was last seen in person on December 15th at the local post office, where she sent several letters and postcards. Her older sister confirmed that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. During their brief conversation over tea, Lindsay handed her sister a note and asked her to read it later. Unfortunately, the sister forgot about the note in her purse and was unable to find it later, leaving its contents a mystery. As the months passed, investigators grew increasingly suspicious that she was no longer alive, given her prolonged absence and lack of contact. Although they couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient evidence, their suspicions about him intensified as they learned more about their history and relationship. Lindsay's parents and detectives suspected Mitchell was involved in her disappearance, but lacked concrete evidence. Searches at their home and nearby turned up nothing. In a televised interview, Mitchell denied any wrongdoing, even claiming Lindsay's family would eventually apologize for suspecting him. Just before the holidays, Mitchell sent a postcard in hair dye to the lead investigator. The postcard's sarcastic message mocked the detective, implying he needed confidence and to cover his gray hair. This gesture showcased Mitchell's arrogance, despite portraying himself as a victim in the media. The investigation team held an interview to clarify some aspects of the case, but they didn't reveal all the details. They suggested that Mitchell Key, a well-known family man, was not what he seemed to be. In 2000, Mitchell Key found himself at the center of a scandal when it was discovered that he had been forging his wife's signature to claim social benefits. Although this revelation indirectly supported the theory that he was involved in Lindsay's disappearance, the investigators had trouble making progress due to Mitchell's popularity. Many people defended him, arguing that as a single father, he needed financial assistance. Despite this, the detectives were able to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was found guilty and sentenced to a month of community service. Mitchell's situation took a turn for the worse. The forged signature of his missing wife raised more than a few eyebrows, and the public's outrage grew. As the criticism mounted, Mitchell's composure began to fray, and he lashed out at the media for invading his personal life. In a groundbreaking development, a visitor to an amusement park on June 1, 2000, stumbled upon a disturbing discovery that rekindled the Lindsay disappearance case. Their dog's strange behavior near the roller coaster led to the discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lindsay, revealing she had been the victim of a violent crime. This breakthrough shifted the investigation's focus to finding the person responsible. On June 7th, Mitchell was questioned by detectives for over 36 hours, during which time he eventually cracked under the pressure and confessed to murdering and dismembering his wife. According to his testimony, Lindsay had asked for a divorce on December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister. This request enraged Mitchell, causing him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her body in their bedroom, taking steps to conceal the smell. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, Mitchell turned to his brother Elliot, a butcher, for assistance. Although Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually convinced him to help. While their children played in the next room, the brothers dismembered Lindsay's body and later scattered her remains throughout the city. The murderer showed no remorse or empathy during his confession. Instead, he seemed to take pride in his actions, saying that without his confession, they would never have been able to prove his guilt. He then led the authorities to the locations where he had hidden the victim's body parts. Unfortunately, her head and one hand were never found. The forensic examination confirmed that all of those of Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Mitchell brothers took place in January 2001 and was a relatively straightforward process. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist observed that Mitchell displayed classic characteristics of a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. Elliot, Mitchell's brother, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in covering up the crime. Lindsay's children were taken care of by her grandparents, who gave them their last name. 3 months after the sentence, the Wilson family faced another tragedy when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the loss, took his own life in the family's attic. In his goodbye note, he expressed his desire to reunite with Lindsay, saying he saw no point in living in a world he considered cruel. As of 2017, Mitchell Key, Lindsay's murderer, became eligible for parole, but as of January 2023, his parole requests have been denied 3 times. The case of Zhu Ling. Tsinghua University, often called the Harvard of China, was hosting a joint event with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. The occasion was of great significance. The well-dressed audience entered the Grand Theater, men in tailored black suits with shiny cufflinks and women in beautiful long dresses carrying small handbags. They exchanged smiles and chatted amicably as they made their way to their seats. Zhu Ling, a Tsinghua University student preparing to showcase her talent that evening, was under great pressure. She was facing a particularly important challenge. She was about to perform a 6-minute solo, considered to be the 6 minutes that would define her life. The audience, which could include professors, potential employers, and benefactors, all key to her career prospects, added to the tension. Any mistakes were unacceptable. She needed to impress them with her performance. Zhu wanted to immerse herself completely in the rhythm and spirit of the guqin, an ancient Chinese instrument favored by scholars, intellectuals, and literati. Those who mastered it were always considered gentle and sensitive. The instrument symbolized prestige, boasting a long history. The Song Dynasty guqin was recently valued at 22 million yuan, making it one of the most expensive guqin in existence. Many of Zhu's friends stood near the stage, their anxiety almost equal to hers, as they had witnessed everything she had endured in the past 2 months for this moment. She had devoted her entire mind to these 6 minutes and almost sacrificed her health for this performance. Her nerves were so tense that she had barely eaten anything in the 3 days before the recital. The stress made her stomach hurt, she had trouble sleeping, she had trouble staying awake, and her vision started to blur. When Zhu finally stepped onto the stage, she bowed to the audience, sat down, and began to play the guqin. At first, her friends held their breath, but the tension quickly melted away and they were immersed in the music. Ju appeared calm and confident. She immersed herself in the melody, her hands moving gracefully to create beautiful sounds that filled the entire theater. Some of her friends were in tears. It was as if Ju had poured out all the stress and anxiety of the past 2 months and turned them into a powerful emotion through her performance. When the 6 minutes were up, the audience exploded with applause. Ju bowed deeply, smiled, and left the stage. She had no idea that her best friend was in the audience, clapping enthusiastically and smiling brightly, even though her hands were red from the effort. There was also a hint of worry in her expression. That night, Ju decided to skip the celebration and go home to rest. The stress of her training had left her feeling completely exhausted. When she got to her room, she started to take a shower, and as she washed her hair, she looked down at her hands. She noticed a clump of hair, and as she ran her fingers through it, she touched her scalp. She suddenly panicked, quickly pulled back the shower curtain and ran to the mirror. Her reflection showed a tired face with small, uneven bald patches. This was just the beginning. In the following weeks, Ju's health would decline severely, leaving her unable to move, speak, or even control her facial muscles. She would go from being a promising student at Tsinghua University to someone with the cognitive abilities of a 6-year-old. This whole situation is not a disease, nor is it a genetic defect. Ju has gone through something, and it is the actions of others. The chances of ordinary students being accepted into Harvard are higher than those of Tsinghua University, especially for native Chinese. The local acceptance rate is only 0.4%, making the school more accessible to international students. The university operates on an annual budget of $5 billion. It is an institution where the daughters of influential politicians and the sons of wealthy businessmen are educated. Each of them is extremely intelligent and highly educated, possessing high intellectual abilities. The real challenge is not just getting into the university, it is also overcoming the fierce competition among students. Some alumni have shared that in order to stay ahead, many have resorted to manipulative tactics, such as betraying friends and using deception, all fueled by the relentless competitive spirit at this school. In 1994, Zhu Ling was one of 31 chemistry students at Tsinghua University, ranked in the top 3 out of 20 men and 11 women. She was often regarded as the embodiment of excellence, recognized as the best among her peers. Zhu was not only intelligent but also tall and beautiful, making people predict a bright future. Zhu had a charming and confident appearance. When she moved into the dormitory, she made her classmates jealous because she easily made friends and attracted fans with her friendly personality. She actively participated in school activities, regularly attended lectures and completed her assignments, impressing many with her seemingly endless energy. However, after a few months, people began to notice a strange change and a worrying state in her. She seemed less stressed even during graduation week. Suddenly, her vitality seemed to have drained away. She began arriving to class later than her classmates and often appeared tired during lectures. Zhu sat in class, sweating profusely as if she were overheating. She found it difficult to concentrate on her lessons and suffered from severe stomach pain, which many, including her teachers, believed was due to stress. She went to the school infirmary in hopes of relieving the pain, but the medicine only had a mild analgesic effect. At first, she was just a little late to class, but soon she stopped going to school altogether. Worried about her health, her friends decided to check on her at the dormitory, which she shared with 3 other girls. When they arrived, they found her lying on her bed, shivering and groaning in pain, with strands of black hair on her pillow. Her panicked classmates urged her to see a doctor. But Zhu brushed off their worries, saying she was just stressed and promising to return to class the next day, assuring everyone that everything would be fine by the end of the semester. Zhu, who had once been full of life and health, now looked unrecognizable. Her skin had turned pale, and her lips had turned purple. She looked like a ghost wandering the campus, moving slowly as if every step caused her excruciating pain. Most of her hair had fallen out, leaving her nearly bald, and she constantly wore something on her head to cover it. Sometimes her vision blurred, leading to temporary blindness that could last for hours. This drastic change in her health led to various speculations among the students about what could be wrong with her. Some believe she may have cancer, while others suggest she has hair loss, or possibly an autoimmune disorder. However, more ominous speculations have emerged among students, linking Zhu's decline to stress stemming from an argument with her close friend, Sunny. Zhu's change seems to coincide with their falling out after Zhu missed an orchestra rehearsal for a difficult piece. Sunny told the instructor that Zhu skipped because she felt she was too good, implying that others needed to practice to reach her level. When Zhu learned of her close friend's harsh words about her, she was shocked and saddened. Others in the university had a completely different view. As a chemistry student, some believed that Zhu had been involved in secret experiments aimed at making a breakthrough, but would a good student risk harming herself? Beige, a classmate at Tsinghua University and Zhu's friend since high school, decided to visit her in the hospital, bringing a fruit basket. However, upon entering her hospital room, Beige was shocked. His first reaction was to run away. Not because he was afraid of being infected, but because he was shocked to see his classmate in such a critical condition. Just a few months ago, Zhu had been healthy, but now she lay there, barely clothed, almost hairless, and connected to multiple machines with tubes through her nose. Her mouth was open in a silent voice, her body was shaking involuntarily, her face was partially paralyzed, and her eyes were wide open in despair as if begging for help. The sight was heartbreaking. Even the slightest touch caused her excruciating pain. It seemed that even her hospital gown was causing her more pain. Beige recognized his friend's silent cry for help, understood the message in her eyes, a look he would never forget. He decided to take action and began asking questions, searching for answers with Zhu's parents. Beige urged the doctors to make a diagnosis. The doctors were baffled by her condition. As Beige learned more about the onset of Zhu's illness, her parents shared that the initial symptoms seemed mild. About a month or two ago, she had experienced stomach cramps that came and went unpredictably. Within a week, the pain worsened to the point where she had to bend over in pain. She often lay on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. At first, she tried to ease the pain by drinking large amounts of Chinese herbal tea, but her condition continued to worsen, eventually causing her to faint. Overwhelmed by her demanding university schedule, Zhu put off seeing a doctor, hoping the pain would go away on its own. Her vision began to deteriorate, first blurring and then disappearing completely for hours at a time. Soon after, she began losing her hair, which was especially distressing for a young woman. Her condition worsened and she was hospitalized just days before Christmas, marking her first time in a hospital. Throughout the month, her parents stayed by her side as she was treated by medical staff. Tests for arsenic and mercury poisoning came back normal, but a doctor from another hospital recalled a similar case from the 1960s and suggested thallium poisoning as a possibility. However, Zhu insisted that she had never been exposed to thallium during her studies. The hospital contacted Tsinghua University to find out what chemicals Zhu might have been exposed to as a chemistry student. Despite their investigation, her medical records showed no signs of exposure to any chemicals that could explain her symptoms, leaving her condition a mystery to the medical team. After a month, Zhu's health seemed to have improved and she asked to return to school. She was eager to take exams and did not want to waste the semester. However, her parents were strongly opposed to her returning to university, believing that stress was the cause of her illness. Despite their concerns, Zhu feigned health and returned to class in February. Unfortunately, by March, her health had deteriorated significantly and she was hospitalized again, where she was so weak that she could not even speak. Frustrated by the lack of response from the local medical community, Beige decided to take action. He contacted medical professionals around the world, not just in China. He translated Zhu's symptoms into multiple languages and posted them on specialized online medical forums. Within half an hour, he received his first response. Over the next few days, he received some 2,000 emails from 18 different countries. Those who responded were not just ordinary internet users. Many were affiliated with national health organizations and specialized in toxicology. All believed that this was a manifestation of thallium poisoning. The symptoms suggested a deliberate and calculated attempt to poison Zhu. Thallium is a dense and highly toxic metal that was previously used in rat poison, but major countries such as China and the United States banned it in the early 20th century. The symptoms of thallium poisoning are so varied that doctors often misdiagnose it, and the discovery of the poison can take some time. Unlike other poisons, thallium does not cause visible signs such as bruises or wounds, making identification difficult. The poisoning occurs in stages, starting with a mild stomach upset, then escalating into severe pain, followed by symptoms such as tremors, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. The victim then experiences severe skin pain, a feeling of severe burning, and even the slightest touch is extremely painful. Clothing and bedding can become a source of unbearable discomfort. In the final stages, neurological symptoms appear, including involuntary movements, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis, eventually leading to cognitive impairment and intellectual decline. In Zhu's case, this resulted in a dramatic decline from a top student at one of the most prestigious universities to the intellectual capacity of a 6-year-old. Beige, along with Zhu's parents, sorted through numerous emails and shared their findings with the medical team treating Zhu. However, doctors remained skeptical of the diagnosis given by online sources. They stressed that specific tests are needed to detect thallium in the body, as this can only be done by sending the patient's blood to a specialized laboratory. They also mentioned that thallium is a rare and highly regulated substance, making it difficult to obtain. Furthermore, doctors explained that if Zhu had indeed been poisoned by thallium, the antidote would likely not work at this advanced stage of the disease. This news shocked Zhu's family and friends. The main question is, who wanted to harm Zhu? One theory is that her parents may have been the intended targets, given their important jobs. Her father is a senior engineer at a national agency, possibly involved in handling sensitive information, while her mother works as an engineer at a well-known Chinese company. However, this line of investigation has hit a dead end, with the main focus shifting to how the poison entered Zhu's body, especially since no one else on campus has shown similar symptoms, suggesting that Zhu ingested or had direct contact with the substance. While Zhu was hospitalized, her personal belongings were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The missing items included shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, body soap, and even her water cup. Strangely, the thief seemed to have targeted only Zhu's belongings, making this an unusual and unprecedented event in the dormitory of such a prestigious university. Since there were no surveillance cameras on campus at the time, an investigation was necessary. Because students were housed in separate rooms for men and women, the female dormitory is only for current female students of Tsinghua University. Alumni, graduate students, and professors are not allowed in the dormitory. The police began an extensive investigation into more than 24 suppliers known to have supplied thallium. Thallium is still used in the production of optical lenses, electronics, and other products. Upon closer examination of the procurement records, they learned that a supplier had supplied alumni to the chemistry department of Tsinghua University for research purposes. The investigation revealed that only a select group within the university had access to the complex: 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 senior students. Therefore, the perpetrators were able to obtain thallium through experiments and take personal items from Zhu Ling's room to commit the crime. As the investigation continued, the professors and 3 graduate students were quickly eliminated as suspects because they were not allowed into the female dormitory. This left 2 senior students, 1 male and 1 female, as the main focus. Since the male students were not allowed into the female dormitory, suspicion shifted to the female student. Surprisingly, this student was none other than Sunny, Zhu's best friend and roommate. This made her the prime suspect in Zhu's attempted murder. Mutual acquaintances of the 2 young women shared that Zhu had recently won a student election against Sunny. Sunny was known to not accept defeat easily. She was quarrelsome by nature and had cheated on her best friends several times. As Zhu gained recognition and success, Sunny became increasingly frustrated. Zhu's impressive solo performance at the Beijing Symphony Hall only added to the tension between them. Zhu was not only talented and admired by her peers, but also respected by her faculty, which may have made Sunny even more jealous. Sunny was interrogated for 8 hours before her parents sent her home. Her family was influential at Tsinghua University, with her father a key figure in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee and her grandfather a former vice president. Many of her relatives held important positions in the government or at top universities. As a result, Zhu Ling's case remained unsolved. Sunny maintained her innocence, claiming that the police had cleared her of all suspicion. She later changed her name and date of birth, married an American, and moved to the United States, where she lived freely. Zhu's diagnosis came too late. Thallium was confirmed to be the cause of her mysterious illness. By the time it was discovered, her thallium levels were extremely high. The antidote, Prussian blue, could not help because the poisoning had progressed too far. Zhu was declared permanently disabled, suffering from irreversible nerve damage. She now has the mental capacity of a child, is paralyzed in the face, and uses a wheelchair to get around. Zhu's family later received $14,000 from the hospital for the misdiagnosis and mishandling of her case. The police quietly closed the case without informing her family, adding to their grief and suspicion. Zhu Ling lived to be 50 years old before passing away. Her parents were grateful that she lived so long despite her condition, but the person responsible for her suffering was never punished. Roxanne was born on September 21, 1961, and grew up in a family with 2 sisters and a brother. In 1987, at the age of 26, she married Derek Duran. Before their marriage, Roxanne studied chemistry at university and worked in a pharmaceutical plant, while Derek was employed in the computer industry. Both were ambitious and career-focused, but always made time for each other. Their relationship blossomed as they planned to start a family after achieving their professional goals and purchasing a home. In 1996, at the age of 34, Roxanne and Derek decided to move to the countryside to escape the noise and bustle of city life. They settled in a large house in Wales Creek, just a 30-minute drive from Portland. It was close to their workplace, yet it offered the peaceful rural lifestyle they desired. Additionally, they purchased land on the outskirts of the city, which gave them the privacy and tranquility they were seeking. It was an idyllic setting, perfect for settling down and starting a family. Initially, life in their new home was peaceful and they built close relationships with their neighbors. Their spacious house became home to several cats and dogs, but a sense of emptiness remained. Sadly, they were not successful in having children, despite keeping hope and continuing to plan for a family. At this point, Roxanne decided to restore the farm, with a dream of raising horses, a passion she soon devoted herself to. She invested heavily in the farm, determined to turn it into a profitable family business. Initially, Derek, as the primary breadwinner, was skeptical. He worried about the financial risks and questioned the feasibility of Roxanne's plans. However, she remained undeterred, often explaining how working with animals brought her peace and helped relieve stress. Eventually, they decided to expand their property to accommodate the growing farm. Sadly, Roxanne did not live to see this dream come to fruition. On Sunday, February 4th, 1996, around noon, Derek left the house to buy groceries while Roxanne stayed home to rest. About 30 minutes later, neighbors living about a kilometer away noticed thick black smoke rising into the sky. While they couldn't determine the source of the fire, they suspected it was significant and called the fire department immediately. The farm's remote location delayed the fire department's arrival, which took nearly 20 minutes. By the time they reached the scene, the entire house was engulfed in flames. Fire poured from every window and door, and the roof appeared on the verge of collapse. Unable to enter the blazing structure, firefighters focused on containing the flames from the outside. Meanwhile, Derek, returning from the supermarket, spotted the smoke from afar and raced home. When Derek arrived, he saw firefighters struggling to control the fire. Noticing Roxanne's car still in the garage, he informed the fire chief that she was likely inside the house. Tragically, the flames were too intense for anyone to enter. Grief-stricken, Derek was overcome with despair. He screamed, cried, and even attempted to run into the burning building, but firefighters restrained him. Helpless, he fell to his knees and watched in agony as the fire consumed their home. The firefighters took about 3 hours to extinguish the fire. By the time the flames were under control, the house had been completely burned to the ground. In the aftermath, authorities discovered charred human remains in extremely poor condition. The damage to the remains was so severe that determining the victim's gender, let alone identifying them, was impossible. Even forensic experts had difficulty analyzing the bodies because of the severe damage, while supporting documents such as dental records were destroyed in the fire. To identify the victim, investigators opted for a more precise approach. Bone marrow samples were extracted from the remains and compared to DNA samples from Roxanne's parents. This analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Roxanne, Derek's wife. Once her identity was established, the focus shifted to uncovering the cause of the fire and determining the circumstances of her death. The cause of the fire became a puzzling mystery. The house had been completely destroyed, leaving little evidence to explain how such a devastating blaze began. However, the fire brigade suspects that the fire may have been deliberately started by humans, as its intensity indicates signs of human involvement. This raises important questions. How could the fire have spread so fiercely, and was someone behind it? The fire spread quickly, destroying the family's entire farm, making Derek an immediate target of police attention. Authorities were baffled by Roxanne's death in the fire. Why hadn't she escaped and saved herself when the fire started? The flames did not engulf the house instantly but spread gradually, which should have given Roxanne time to take action and flee. Even if she had been asleep, the acrid smell of smoke or the sound of crackling flames would likely have woken her. Moreover, farm animals will also respond, contributing to the alarm. These factors made investigators suspect that the fire was not accidental. Of course, Derek is quickly being interrogated. Although he had recovered from the initial shock, he was still disoriented. Nevertheless, he answered the detectives' questions coherently. He claimed the fire was likely caused by an accident. He explained that he had let his wife sleep in that morning, allowing her to rest after a long work week. They had no plans that day except to relax. While she slept, he decided to run to the store, hoping to return before she woke up. Before leaving for the store, Derek attempted to make breakfast but noticed that the pipes were frozen. He went to the basement to adjust the heating system, which ran on flammable propane. According to him, the equipment had a malfunction, which could have allowed dangerous gas to leak into the utility room. Despite this, there were no apparent fire sources in the basement, as the wiring was concealed. Due to the complete destruction of the house, investigators struggled to verify Derek's account. Forensic experts and fire service specialists meticulously examined the evidence. They determined the fire started in the basement but could not identify the precise cause. Although Derek's story sounded logical, detectives remained skeptical, suspecting that something did not add up. To confirm his alibi, they asked him to provide receipts from the grocery store. Derek complied and handed over the receipt, but law enforcement still viewed him with suspicion. They theorized he might have tampered with the equipment or even set the house on fire intentionally before leaving for the store to create an alibi. Their suspicions were heightened by scratches they noticed on Derek's face during the interrogation. When questioned, he explained that the scratches were likely from clearing debris on Friday. Lacking concrete evidence against Derek, the authorities had no choice but to release him. However, the investigation remains ongoing due to suspicions that the fire might not have been an accident, especially considering the severity of it. Investigators are looking into other possibilities and are closely analyzing Derek's statements. In the garage, where there were fewer flammable materials, providing some protection from the fire, Roxanne's car was found. The police noticed that the car battery's wires were disconnected and speculated that this could have caused a spark. They theorized that the fire might have started when gas that had accumulated in the basement ignited. During this time, construction work on the house had left one wall partially dismantled, allowing an influx of oxygen. Fire experts believed this provided the conditions for gas to seep into the garage, creating a point of ignition. They also suggested that the unfinished state of the building may have accelerated the fire's spread. However, further investigation revealed no evidence linking the car or its battery to the fire. Surprisingly, the car was undamaged, which seemed unlikely if it had been the source of the blaze. The investigation then shifted to a new clue. In the basement, near the heating equipment, investigators discovered a pile of burnt pellets of unknown origin. This pile appeared to have been deliberately placed near the fire's point of origin. Initially, it was unclear what the substance was or how it might have fueled the fire. 3 days later, forensic scientists identified the pellets as cat litter. Although Derek and Roxanne had cats, their litter boxes were never kept in the basement. This raised suspicions that the placement of the litter near the heating equipment had been intentional. Detectives suspected that Derek might have used the cat litter to start the fire, but they initially couldn't determine how. Further analysis confirmed that the pellets matched the type of litter Derek and Roxanne used. A bag of the same litter was found in the house, but it had been stored far from the basement's point of origin. It was confirmed that Derek had purchased and stored this litter in his office before bringing it home. Initially, the litter was kept far from the basement. However, evidence suggested that Derek might have deliberately poured some of the litter near the heating equipment to fuel the fire. The issue was that cat litter, made from compressed sawdust, doesn't burn easily. This raised a puzzling question: how could such a small amount of litter cause a fire that destroyed the entire farm residence? A detective, who had been a Boy Scout in his youth, offered a possible explanation. He mentioned that in his Boy Scout days, counselors demonstrated survival techniques, including a trick for starting fires. It involved soaking materials to aid in ignition. Interestingly, Derek had also been a Boy Scout and might have been familiar with this fire-starting method. However, despite investigators' efforts to prove the fire was arson, they found no conclusive evidence to confirm their suspicions. Much of the evidence had been destroyed in the fire. Derek denied any involvement in the blaze, but investigators needed proof of his innocence or guilt. They brought in specially trained dogs to search the scene for flammable or explosive materials, suspecting that an accelerant like gasoline might have been used to start the fire. Given the extent of the destruction, these tools were essential. Yet even after a thorough search of the ashes, the dogs found no traces of accelerants. Tests on substances like the cat litter produced no reaction either. Investigators also looked into Derek and Roxanne's personal lives but found nothing suspicious. There were no signs that Derek or his wife, Roxanne, had enemies, and those who knew them described them as a respectable couple with a happy marriage. No one could believe that Derek might be involved in such a crime. Forensic experts from the armed forces continued their investigation at the scene. Slowly, suspicions began to take shape. Near Roxanne's body, investigators discovered a melted pistol. Its presence raised questions. Why was a weapon there? Derek explained that it could have fallen from its storage spot near the bed. The bedroom contained several legally registered firearms for self-defense. A forensic examination suggested that Roxanne might have died from a gunshot wound. However, no bullets were recovered, and the fire had destroyed much of the evidence. The poor condition of Roxanne's body made it difficult to definitively prove or disprove whether a firearm had been used, leaving investigators with unanswered questions. The final report from the forensic expert provided important clues. According to the expert, Roxanne's lungs contained no soot, confirming the investigators' suspicion. She had not inhaled smoke and must have died before the fire started. Additionally, no carbon monoxide was found in her blood, further supporting this conclusion. Unfortunately, due to the condition of the remains, the exact cause of death could not be determined. Despite this, the detectives were convinced they were investigating a murder. The circumstances strongly suggested foul play. It was unlikely that a young and healthy woman would remain trapped in bed during a fire unless something violent had occurred beforehand. Furthermore, the fire appeared to be a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence and cover up the crime. Upon closer examination, traces of blood were discovered in Roxanne's lungs, which the forensic expert believed may have resulted from a severe head injury that caused internal bleeding. This suggested that she had inhaled her own blood, which further reinforced the theory of a violent death. The key question now was, who could have killed Roxanne in the short window between Derek leaving the house and the fire starting? It seemed highly improbable that a random attacker had chosen this exact moment to strike. Investigators decided to delve deeper into Derek and Roxanne's lives to uncover any potential motives. They learned that Roxanne and Derek frequently argued, primarily over financial matters. Derek had grown frustrated with his wife's spending habits, which stemmed from her passion for horses. She had recently purchased an expensive horse, and its upkeep costs were significant. She also invested additional money into training for equestrian competitions, which demanded even more of her time and resources. Not only was this expensive, it also took up a large portion of her time and energy, leaving Derek feeling abandoned. Matters worsened a week before the tragedy when Derek's employer informed him of his upcoming promotion to a managerial position that required him to relocate. Although this was a major career advancement for Derek, it introduced even more tension into their marriage as their disagreements intensified. The problem was clear. Derek's new office was located approximately 200 kilometers away, and Roxanne was adamantly opposed to moving because of her horses. This conflict sparked several heated arguments, as confirmed by Roxanne's relatives. However, there were no prior indications of violence or cruelty, and no one suspected foul play. Roxanne's younger sister, who maintained frequent contact with her, revealed that she had planned to remain at the farmhouse. She had suggested that Derek rent an apartment near his new workplace and return home on weekends. Predictably, Derek disliked this arrangement and tried to convince Roxanne to sell the farm and move with him. She disagreed, causing tension in the family to rise. At the fire scene, forensic experts discovered that a gas hose connected to the heating system had been detached, resulting in a gas leak. Derek claimed the hose may have become dislodged during the fire, possibly when a firefighter accidentally pulled it. However, the hose was fitted with a threaded connector, which made it clear that it could not have simply come loose. Moreover, there was no visible damage to the hose, indicating that it had been deliberately unscrewed. Further forensic analysis of the ashes confirmed that the fire at the Roxanne residence was an act of arson. Once investigators received the official report, suspicions of Derek's involvement in his wife's murder were strengthened. The remaining evidence, however scant, now needs to be linked to him. Police have asked him to provide his clothing for further analysis. It was recalled that, on the day of the interrogation, a suspicious dark stain appeared on Derek's pants. Initially, this detail was overlooked, as the case had not yet been classified as a murder. However, as the investigation progressed, the stain gained significance. Derek claimed it was just dirt from working on his car and denied it could be blood. Subsequent testing revealed that the stain was indeed blood, and it belonged to Roxanne. This discovery exposed Derek's lie and reinforced the police's suspicions. In March 1996, following a month-long investigation into Roxanne's death, Derek was arrested and charged with arson and murder. From the outset, he maintained his innocence, even displaying arrogance toward authorities. He treated the trial like a chess game, casually discussing it with his friends and colleagues. The prosecution argued that on the day of the murder, Derek and Roxanne had another dispute, possibly about moving or their horses. They alleged that, in a fit of rage, he attacked and killed his wife. This claim was supported by suspicious scratches on his face, which appeared shortly before his police interrogation. The scratches resembled nail marks, but defense witnesses testified that, on the morning of February 4, 1996, Derek had been dealing with a neighbor's pets and had an altercation with their dog. Four individuals corroborated this account, suggesting the scratches could have occurred naturally. The prosecution countered with inconsistencies in Derek's explanations. At one point, he claimed the scratches were from cleaning the yard and scraping against branches. However, investigators concluded the injuries may have occurred on different days. Witnesses and Derek's lawyer offered explanations for the various marks, including the dog altercation and yard work. Despite these accounts, attention shifted to more incriminating evidence, the bloodstain on Derek's trousers. Initially, it was theorized that Derek might have been injured during the dog incident and accidentally left the bloodstain. However, forensic experts have dismissed this idea, asserting that the pattern of the bloodstains does not match the wound caused by a bite or scratch. Instead, the evidence suggested the stain resulted from a direct physical attack, possibly by Derek. In his defense, he argued that Roxanne occasionally wore his trousers while horseback riding, as they had a similar build. He speculated that she might have injured herself while riding and wiped her blood onto the pants. He maintained that he had no direct knowledge of how the bloodstain got there. The defense contended that the blood on the trousers could not conclusively link Derek to the murder, as it was unclear when the stain appeared. To reinforce this view, they invited an independent forensic expert to analyze and present a report. The expert said Roxanne had inhaled more blood than initially thought, indicating she had suffered a prolonged beating, severe facial injuries that did not kill her immediately, leading to severe bleeding. The horrifying details of Roxanne's suffering and the state of her burned body added emotional weight to the prosecution's case. However, the defense attorney emphasized that the evidence was circumstantial and based largely on assumptions rather than concrete proof, which was particularly significant given Derek's previously good reputation. The defense highlighted Derek's favorable character, arguing that no one in his life had ever seen him act aggressively or inappropriately. He was widely described as friendly, adaptable, and easygoing, despite his recent disagreements with Roxanne. Witnesses testified that he and his wife shared a loving relationship, built on mutual understanding. At work, Derek was known as a hardworking, successful IT professional who advanced quickly in his career. Neighbors described him as polite and respectful, and he had no prior legal troubles, especially not involving violence. Despite his declarations of innocence, investigators continued to scrutinize inconsistencies in his statements. Derek, despite not being interested in horses, supported his wife by helping her build a stable and a riding area, and even by joining her in equestrian classes. Following the trial's closing arguments, the jury deliberated for over 12 hours but couldn't reach a verdict. This was largely due to the forensic scientists' failure to determine the exact cause of Roxanne's death. Without conclusive evidence, Derek was not convicted of premeditated murder. However, he was found guilty of arson and negligent homicide based on his own admission that he had turned the heating system to its maximum setting and neglected to check on his wife. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Throughout the trial, he maintained his innocence and criticized the prosecution as unjust, frequently venting his frustrations to friends and colleagues. After the sentencing, public opinion largely sided with the prosecution, as the charges seemed justified. Derek served his 10-year sentence and was released on November 30, 2006, under mandatory supervision for 3 years, which he completed without any issues. After his release, he started his life over, found a new job, and, on October 15, 2010, remarried Janine, a local radio presenter. Janine firmly believed in Derek's innocence and described him as a loving, caring husband who gave her no reason to feel unsafe. Since his release, he has had no legal troubles. Despite his conviction, Derek continues to assert his innocence, maintaining that he was wrongfully accused. Although his efforts to appeal and clear his name have failed, he has expressed gratitude for the chance to rebuild his life and for the support of friends and family who stood by him. Questions about Roxanne's death remain unresolved. Was it truly an accident, or could a stranger have been involved? Share your thoughts in the comments.